Association of Broadcasters.
Okay, welcome back to our trading channel. Just to remind you, you can follow us for free, copy our trades, and make some profit. If you're looking for our trading strategy, please go to www.company.co.uk/daytradingstrategy.html. We trade live our own funds in front of you and our customers so they can see how their investment growing. I'll try to put right now my stop on profit for British pound higher, because as you can see, British pound moved on. So I will put my stop on profit to 124.31. As you can see, we purchased in 124.1. Right now, stop on profit at 124.31. The price at this moment 124.47. So we're already in about £3,000 in profit. Okay, we'll see what's going to happen with it. If it will move on, I will increase my stop on profit. Okay, speak to you later.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1212. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
If you want to find out what the best laptop is for all those video conferences with your colleagues while sitting at your makeshift desk, you could ask an algorithm, or someone called Al, or Kai, or Rachel, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hi, you're talking to Ali on Shop Live.
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Start the conversation now with Shop Live.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors?
Sweet.
The new Honda E with wind cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at Hong Kong, and particularly China's security crackdown as it unfolds Hong Kong back into the mainland. Plus, Karen Mills, former SBA administrator and senior fellow at Harvard Business School, on the ongoing PPP and what it needs, as well as transparency on where the money went. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, this just crossed the Bloomberg terminal. Crude oil inventories are down 7.2 million barrels, according to the EIA. Meanwhile, stocks are up after positive coronavirus vaccine developments. We check those numbers every 15 minutes. The S&P's up 0.7%, up 21. The Dow's up 0.5%, up 143. And the Nasdaq's up 0.7%, up 68. The 10-year is down 12/30 seconds. The yield 0.69%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.8% at 39.60 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 1.5% at 17.7320 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.44. The euro $1.1271. The pound $1.2456. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
A very interesting day for Hong Kong. China describing Hong Kong's new security law as a sword of Damocles hanging over its most strident critics. In other words, China is very pleased about it. It's not quite clear exactly what Hong Kong residents think about it. However, we did have Boris Johnson coming out today and offering citizenship to people who wish to move to Britain from Hong Kong. It's, of course, former colony. Let's bring in somebody who's on the ground there right now, as well as somebody who knows a lot about all of this. Jody Schneider is Senior International Editor in Hong Kong. We're also welcoming Andy Brown, Editorial Director for Bloomberg New Economy. Jody, the details of the law came out last night, about 35 pages. Have residents managed to digest exactly what's in it, and could you give us bullet points?
Yeah, so this is, of course, very historic, and it's coming, it's the day 23 years ago when China took over Hong Kong. Hong Kong was handed over to China from the UK. And this, of course, is very, it's concerning a lot of people here because it's very, the tough provisions in this national security law have really gone beyond what many investors and even pro-Beijing politicians had thought was in there. There's a lot of concern about whether it's going to have a chilling effect, not only in dissent in the city, but over free speech and maybe even freedom of the press. Of course, the business community is very concerned about what it could mean for them, and if they start to see have trouble getting talent here, and also how it could affect their businesses. There's a lot of vague language in the law, and so it's really generating a lot of confusion about what is allowed. What kinds of speech are even allowed anymore here? And of course, it's very sudden kind of change. One day, you could be arrested for certain kinds of things. Now you could be arrested in a very opaque kind of system. There were already arrests today that came with the protests here against the law, and on this handover day, there were already arrests that they said were made that Beijing kind of boasted came under the law, including someone flying a flag that was proclaiming independence, that was seeking independence for Hong Kong.
Andrew, I just happened to be in Hong Kong on this day 23 years ago on a business trip, and I remember the handover clearly, and I remember thinking to myself, there's just no way this is going to end well for the folks of Hong Kong. China is going to assert full control over Hong Kong. It's just a matter of time. I'm actually quite surprised it's taken this long. What's the feeling, as you think about the greater China's policy strategy? What is their view towards Hong Kong, do you think?
Well, Paul, I was in Hong Kong that day too, and you were obviously very precedent because I think quite a lot of people hoped and expected that since China and the United Kingdom had signed an international agreement under which Hong Kong would retain its autonomy, retain its freedoms, retain its judicial independence, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and so on, that this would continue as promised for 50 years. And what we've now seen, of course, is that Hong Kong is becoming, to all intents and purposes, another Chinese city. It's going to lose its international personality, and the trend is very clear now. It's going to become a financial center, more a financial center for China and less an international. And those parts of the sort of the international mandate of Hong Kong as a global hub will migrate to other parts of the region, to Singapore, Tokyo, perhaps even Taipei.
Who is the moral arbiter here, though, Andy? I mean, is it clear that the wrong thing is happening? If China wants Hong Kong to help it become stronger in the international financial system, for example, isn't it doing the right thing for its citizens?
This is it is a sword of Damocles, and it's not a sword of Damocles that is hanging over extremists in Hong Kong. It's a sword of Damocles that hangs over the whole territory. As Jody says, this is way worse than anybody had predicted. Not just in the fact that, you have 4 new categories of crime: sedition, secession, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces, which are broad enough to encompass pretty much any action or expression that the Chinese state doesn't like. It also, by the way, has no borders, so it doesn't just apply to Hong Kong and Hong Kong residents. It applies to actions and to people anywhere in the world. So this is really China stamping its authority over Hong Kong and defiantly saying to the rest of the world, we don't care what your reaction is.
Jody, what do you expect the reaction to be from the folks on the ground? We've seen protests, really over the last year or so. What do you expect the response to be?
Well, they obviously the law coming out on July 1st was that was not coincidental. I mean, it was meant to try to quell dissent. This is it has been put into effect after 8 months of increasingly anti-China, virulently anti-China, and somewhat violent. They got more violent protests, and there was this was something that embarrassed the central government, and they found that they didn't have any tools at that time to deal with it. Then you had the pandemic and things. The demonstrations stopped, and so this is when they decided to come in this way to really quell not only the dissent, but to really try to take charge in a much more significant way than they had. Even though in recent years there had been more intrusions into Hong Kong's autonomy. Excuse me. So at this point, the question is just, how do companies read this? How do people read this in terms of whether, when they decide that they might leave, or if they stay, what kinds of accommodations they're going to have to make to the new law? And that's really the question.
That's where we are. Yep. Jody Schneider, thanks so much for joining us, Senior International Editor and Co-Lead of Women's Voices in Asia for Bloomberg News, and Andrew Brown, Editorial Director of Bloomberg New Economy Forum. We appreciate your thoughts. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Martin DeCaro. Martin, what do you have?
Hello, Paul. Congress is growing impatient with the Trump administration over reports that Russian operatives paid Taliban militants to kill U.S. forces. So today, intelligence officials are expected to arrange a closed-door briefing for the so-called Gang of 8 House and Senate leaders. Among those not buying White House claims that the president wasn't briefed because the intelligence was dubious, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who declined to say whether he told Trump about it last year in an interview with Bloomberg Radio.
There's not some block of granite that you carry around to show to the president that's called verified intelligence. There's a range, and you deal with uncertainty. That's part of the job.
Bolton says the White House's changing explanations send a message to Russia and other adversaries that the U.S. is in disarray. The country's failure to control the coronavirus now has public health officials urging Americans to stay home for the 4th of July. Washington's Mayor Muriel Bowser dispensing party planning advice.
I certainly have done it when being invited someplace, just simply asking, who else is going to be there? How many people are going to be there?
48,000 cases reported in the U.S. yesterday alone. That's another record. Sources tell Bloomberg Citigroup is now delaying plans to return a small number of office workers in 13 states where the virus is spreading. New York City will not resume indoor dining as planned. So-called super spreader events being reported across the globe. In India, a wedding being blamed for 100 cases. The groom, who was running a high fever, died.
Let's move up my stop on profit for British pound, United States dollar to 124.41. Okay. Just to remind all of you, what you see on the screen is 5 Forex pairs. That's dollar yen, pound, US dollar and Canadian dollar, US dollar, euro against US dollar, and Bitcoin. All positions you can see on our ticker, and also you can see positions I placed on charts also. So when we will extract charts for people who use our strategies, we extract shorter version of charts so they can train themselves in order to trade other pairs, because we cannot physically show you all pairs on one screen. Okay, so we still hold positions on Japanese yen, on Bitcoin, on British pound. So follow us, it's free, no questions asked. So, and make some profit as well with us.
In a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seizchange.
In-depth and
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road, or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Want to be the next entrepreneur, innovator, creator? Join the University of East London, the careers-led university. We prepare students for the jobs of the future with industry-focused teaching and an innovative approach to education. This September, we're introducing a new flexible teaching model to keep our students safe and our education accessible to all. The University of East London, pioneering futures since 1898. Apply for September 2020 at uel.ac.uk/clearing.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a computer or to someone called Colin or Priya or Lewis or Zoe or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
Staying current on college hoops starts here on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. CBS sports columnists Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander bring you commentary, insider information, and statistical analysis covering the entire NCAA.
The amount of earning potential you could have had there, or if you had gone to play at any other place with a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, win a national championship, none of us would have faulted Cunningham for doing that, but he decided this is where he wants to be in the face of a postseason.
Search Eye on College Basketball on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Where do honky and pop culture coexist?
So let me get this straight. You would be able to name more people nostalgically than currently? This doesn't
Come on,
it's
crazy,
I know.
On their podcast, Puck Soup, NHL analyst Greg Wyshynski, Sean McAdoo, and Ryan Lambert chase the conversational biscuit up and down the ice, skating between serious discussion on what's happening in pro hockey to irreverent opinions on movies, fast food, and life in general. Search Puck Soup on TuneIn to listen.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This hot headline just crossing the Bloomberg Terminal. General Motors second quarter U.S. sales are down about 34%. The estimate was for them to be down 35.2%. So far, the stock is little changed. Markets have pulled well off earlier highs, but are still up on news that vaccine is showing promise. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P is up 0.4%, up 12. Dow's up 0.1%, up 28, and the Nasdaq's up 0.5%, up 50. The 10-year is down 11/30 seconds. The yield 0.69%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.1% at 39.35 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 1.5% at 17.7410 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.40. The euro $1.12.63, and the British pound $1.24.46. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the Senate passed an extension of the popular Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses, which was set to close down last night with more than $130 billion in funding left over. The extension goes to August 8th. To get a latest on the PPP and where the money is going, we welcome Karen Mills. She's a senior fellow at the Harvard Business School, former small business administrator for President Obama from 2009 to 2013. Karen, thanks so much for joining us here. So I guess the question is, how effective do you think the PPP has been for small businesses in this country?
Well, I think it's been very effective, and I was delighted by our midnight surprise last night. I really had not anticipated that the Senate would take leadership and renew the PPP. $130 billion is a lot of money in the land of small business, and so far, the results out of the PPP have actually been pretty good. I know the headlines have been about, big companies who didn't need it, who took it, but literally 5 million small businesses have gotten funding without which they would just not be alive today. So if we can get a little bit more out, I think we can save some more businesses.
Karen, what about those that opened and have to now reclose because the virus is actually not going away at all? The curve is steepening in the US, and not just those that reopened and have to close, but those who took the money and kept people on their payrolls and are not getting the revenue, and, this will finish them.
Well, you're exactly right. The virus is not done yet. And even though, there's been an attempt at all these reopenings, small business owners are worried, their customers are worried, and they're desperate, because otherwise they're going to go out of business. So anything we can do to get money into their hands so they can, survive, whether they're partially open, whether they just do takeout. We just need to get them funding because, as you know, small businesses have almost no cash reserves. And whatever they had, that's gone by now. So they are just living hand to mouth. And if we can, what I'd really like to do with this extra money is let them apply again, because the PPP extension would only go to new folks who haven't applied. And I'd like to let, eligible businesses get another few weeks of funding if they possibly can. I think that would be helpful.
Karen, what do we know about where the initial chunk of money went? Is there a good sense that there's oversight there, that we kind of know where the money went, who got it, who didn't get it, and so on?
Well, it's ridiculous that the SBA is not disclosing this. We disclosed everything. It's just table stakes. The American people need to know where their money is used. So I can't imagine why you wouldn't disclosed, and now they've said they're going to. What we do know is that about 5 million small businesses got money. Most of them got small amounts, and thank goodness we had some new players, some tech players, step in and help the banks, because the banks were really struggling to get the small players their money. They just didn't have the mechanism. So then PayPal came in, and Square and Intuit, and they put up these automated portals, which still are up, and allowed the sole proprietors who are eligible, they actually are eligible for PPP, a seamless way without going to a bank. Maybe they didn't have a bank. So that's done a lot of good to the small business owner. But disturbingly, there is an underrepresentation of minority-owned businesses in the PPP, and that's from some survey data from Alignable, and I think that's quite worrisome. Would like to see that percentage go up because, as you know, there's a lot of inequity in access to capital among underserved minority-owned businesses and, by the way, among women-owned businesses. And if they fail in greater proportions, that's just going to hurt everything.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of problems with it in many, many ways. Karen, talk to me, though, about what you would do if you were, say, a restaurant owner or, you know, the owner of a franchise of some chain of restaurants, and you knew that in order to access this money, you had to keep on 75% of your staff, but you're also pretty well aware that you're not going to be able to do 75% of your business, even in 6 months. Yet this is only supposed to tide you over for 2 months. I mean, wouldn't you much rather just fold up shop in order not to get up the hopes of all your previous employees, all your customers, your family?
So small business owners now really are in a dilemma. And I think what they've realized is if you want to keep your business going, you've got to maintain some relationship with your set of employees. The good news is that Congress actually passed something called the Flexibility Act a few weeks ago, and they took that 75% number down to 60%. So only 60% of the money has to pay employees. They gave you more weeks to spread it over, and what that does is allow a business to stay closed longer and take that other 40% of the money and pay the rent and pay for utilities and pay for debt service if they've got another loan. So it's well worth doing. And if you're a small business owner out there and Congress does get their act together and the president does sign an extension of PPP, I would go right away to one of these online portals or your bank. And if you haven't gotten one of these loans, I have to say, even if you're closed, you will find it useful, and your people will get paid, and you'll keep your relationship with them. You'll get to pay your rent. So I think it is well worth doing. And the forgiveness aspect, they are saying they're going to do blanket forgiveness in very small dollar loans. So I would recommend doing it.
So, Karen, what are we seeing on the for these small businesses? How many of them are, in fact, going out of business? How many do you expect to go out of business due to this pandemic?
Well, when you talk about this percentage going out of business, my heart just, rings about it because I think it's going to be very bad. Yeah. My prediction is 20 to 30% of small businesses will fail. Right now we're seeing 5 to 10, but we really haven't seen the bankruptcies come. And that's going to happen in, I would say, 2 to 4 months will be the peak of that. And the reason the number is so high, in part, is sadly there are a lot of businesses operating just on the edge. And particularly we've seen in the older generation, people will just pack it in. They'll just say, you know what, I'm going to fold my tents. This is the time. So that is going to account for some percentage, and that will come all at once, not distributed over a year or 2 years. And the problem with a number like 20 or 30% means that it's very hard to have a U-shaped recovery because it takes 6 to 12 months to get a new business started on Main Street.
Yep.
So it's going to be a while before they get replaced.
It's going to be heartbreaking, and hopefully it will lead to some sort of rebirth of entrepreneurialism at some point in this country. Karen Mills, former SBA head, currently senior fellow at the Harvard Business School. Thank you for joining.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Ronnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
Companies taking aim at coronavirus vaccines and other treatments.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession. The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Ronnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, U.S. manufacturing gauge rises to a 14-month high on reopenings. We're going to talk to Tim Fury, chairman of the Manufacturing Business Survey at the Institute for Supply Management, on the data, plus Tom Orlick, head of Bloomberg Economics. We're going to get his revised economic outlook. That's all coming up on Bloomberg Markets. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
All stocks climbed early after positive coronavirus vaccine developments, better than expected manufacturing data, and a surprise profit from economic bellwether FedEx. Treasuries and the dollar are down. We take a look at these numbers every 15 minutes. The S&P is currently up 0.5%, up 14. The Dow's up 0.2%, up 50, and the Nasdaq is up 0.6%, up 55. The 10-year is down 10 seconds. The yield is 0.69%. West Texas Intermediate crude is nearing that $40 a barrel mark. It's up 1.2% at $39.74, while COMEX gold is down 1.4% at $17.75 even per ounce. The dollar yen 107.51, the euro $1.12.64, the British pound $1.24.61. Tesla has displaced Toyota as the world's most valuable automaker, underscoring investor enthusiasm for a company trying to transform an industry that's relied on internal combustion engines for more than 130 years. Shares of Tesla, which have more than doubled since the start of the year, have climbed as much as 4.7% in intraday trading, currently up 4.6%.
As you can see, I moved further my stop on profit for British pound to 124.501. So we're already in £5,000 profit from trading British pound. I'm wondering where it will go, how far it will go. Yeah. Okay, we will see.
For the Institute for Supply Management based in Florida. Tim, thanks so much for joining us here. It seems like a good number. Is it just because we're reopening and it was kind of easy comps? What's your view on kind of what we saw in June?
Well, I think, we expected that in June we were going to see a positive action, whether it would be 48 or 49 or 52 was a big question. I was pleasantly surprised by the strength on the new order side, on the demand side, supported by the fact that the backlog, although it's still contracting, it's not contracting as bad. Customer inventory is contracted, which is a good thing for the future, and new exports are up 8 points, best that they've been in quite some time. So you can't really get into a demand-driven economy unless there's demand, and we have demand. But we're coming off a low point. So the question now is, what's the future going to be? I mean, we had production level growth here not seen since 1952. On the demand side, again, new orders growth not seen since 1948, and the PMI itself had not seen a rebound like this since 1980. So those are some really impressive numbers.
It's all about direction, right, Tim, when it comes to these data. The problem with that is that there wasn't really any place to go except up. What should we really take away from, say, for example, a 56.4 new orders reading, which in regular times or, less odd times, we think was extraordinary expansion, but it's not. It doesn't mean that this time, does it?
Well, I don't disagree with you there. I mean, we could have stayed flat for some period of time, right? But we've come back up. The question now is, are we going to remain there? I think one of the big positives that came out of here was the fact that it appears that because of the price index being at a 51 and the supplier deliveries numbers coming down to 57, it appears that we've reached seller-buyer parity, which gets us back into a linked supply chain, which gets us back to a demand-driven economy. So, but the big question going forward here is going to be, based on what's happened in the last 5 to 7 days with reopenings, how are they going to affect July? And at this point, nobody really knows. I didn't get comments from my community to that question, but if you ask people today, they would wonder about that. And then lastly, on the comment side, we had 1.3 positive comments to 1 cautious, which is a reversal from the last 3 months where they were all cautious comments versus positive. So I think we're entering in July in a good position, but the big unknown here is the starts and stops with the reopenings and what's that going to mean to the growth profile.
So, Tim, how many months of a 50 or plus 50 reading would give you confidence that maybe this economic recovery is in fact, has some steam to it?
Well, I think the next 3 months is going to tell a story. I wouldn't feel overly concerned if it was a 48.5 either. I mean, I think that means we've kind of stabilized, and okay. I believe based on the information here, it's going to be a slow growth.
The thing of it is, Tim, we had counties and states, so-called reopening, whatever that meant. But I mean, many of them, if they're not reclosing, they should be, or they will be very soon, right? If you take Dr. Fauci seriously, the death toll is going to go up pretty exponentially from here. That does not bode well for manufacturing, does it?
No, it does not. But I think it's going to be more of a county, a city, metropolitan area issue. I don't believe, and there's comments I'm getting from the community here, I don't think anybody really thinks that we're going to shut states down again. So we're going to need to figure out how to get through this. But we do also believe that factories are going to start and stop, and they're going to do 4 days when they plan on doing 5 because they got to sanitize, and it's going to be a rough start. But I think it's going to be more of a metropolitan area, county area. I don't think anybody feels that whole states are going to be shut down again. It's just too damaging.
Tim, in your data set, what are some of the forward-looking data that you get that you kind of focus on?
So So I would really like to see that backlog of orders numbers get up over 50. That would make me feel really good, because that then says that factories have output to satisfy, and that then will drive the employment number up too. So, even with the new orders, I like the new order number 56.4. Even if it was at 52, 53, I'd be okay with that. What I would really like to see is a backlog number come up. And if the production number stays above 50, that means that people are building backlog, which gives them more confidence to invest in the future. Right now, the investment side is pretty much dried up. Everybody is very uncertain about where to invest their money in long-term investments, two-year type durable goods.
Tim, always a pleasure speaking with you. This, of course, Tim Fury, who it tells us all about the ISM manufacturing data every month. He's chairman of the Manufacturing Business Survey at the ISM. And, of course, the overall reading came in at 52.6 in June, much better than the 49.8 that economists were looking for. It is time now to turn our attention to small cap stocks today. They are lower. Let's bring in Dave Wilson to tell us more. Dave, it would appear that the miners are not helping things.
No, and there are a whole lot of other stocks that aren't either. And when you consider the Russell 2000 index is down 0.5%, the S&P 500 is up 0.5%. Biggest drop in Russell actually belongs to Inovio Pharmaceuticals, whose ticker is INO. The developer of a COVID-19 vaccine has dropped almost 18%. Inovio was cut to sell from neutral at Roth Capital Partners, which cited the competition in terms of COVID-19 vaccines. Chiasma, ticker CHMA, has fallen 11%. The drug developer raised $70 million by selling shares and warrants. And Denny's, ticker DENN, has declined 9%. The restaurant chain sold $73 million of stock. That's equivalent to a 12.5% stake. The Russell's biggest gain belongs to Akero Therapeutics, ticker AKRO. The drug developer has risen 31% in response to favorable study data on a treatment for a liver disease. And Axogen, ticker AXGN, has climbed about 22%. The medical equipment maker lined up as much as $75 million in financing through a 7-year agreement with Overland Capital. Axogen has already borrowed $35 million under that deal.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Looking at the markets here, as Dave was mentioning, the Russell index is down about 0.5%, but some of the other indices are trading higher here ever so slightly. The S&P up about almost 0.5% at 15 points, 31.15 on the S&P 500. The Dow Jones Industrial up about 0.2%. That's 48 points. That puts the Dow Jones Industrials at 25,000. Let's call it 860. We'll round up a little bit on the Dow. And NASDAQ up 0.6%, 63 points at 10,121. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Martin DeCaro of Bloomberg News. Bloomberg. Martin.
Hello, Paul. President Trump is denouncing New York City's plan to paint the words Black Lives Matter in a mural along Fifth Avenue outside Trump Tower. On Twitter, the president called it a symbol of hate and admonished the city to spend more money fighting crime instead. The president's racial invective, his handling of the coronavirus, and other factors have combined to diminish his standing in the polls. A new Pew Research Center survey out today says 54% of registered voters back Democratic challenger Joe Biden, 44% support President Trump. But that same Pew Research survey found among evangelical Protestants, Trump rating remains strong at 72%. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his government will allow almost 3 million Hong Kong citizens to move to the UK, risking a further escalation of tensions with China after it enforced a sweeping security law on the former British colony. Speaking in the House of Commons today, the British Prime Minister said the legislation contravenes the 1984 treaty, which set out the one country, two systems approach. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, in an interview with Bloomberg Radio about his memoir on his time in the Trump White House, says the president compromised U.S. interests during meetings with China's leader Xi Jinping by asking his counterpart to buy U.S. farm goods.
On the Chinese side, they understood what was going on. It was not the only occasion where this comment about buying agricultural products was made.
Bolton also said the White House explanations about the Russian bounty payments in Afghanistan sends a message that the U.S. is in disarray. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Coronavirus proved that every aspect of our lives, from business to health, is connected to Asia.
Healthcare firms testing the appetite for IPOs in Hong Kong too.
But you already knew that.
COVID-19 certainly had an impact on this.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern.
What does that mean for Asia if the dollar remains on the back foot for the foreseeable future?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
COVID-19.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable, the lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda, the power of dreams.
My name is Donya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert, or Sean, or Luth, or Ange, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow, because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the? Every Tuesday at KFC. Participating restaurants ends 18th of August 2020. Tuesdays only, subject to availability, not available online.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
When the world stopped, people in our local communities didn't. At the Co-op,
We want to say thank you to all the local heroes. Daksha wanted to help the NHS, so she and her husband Parish cooked 50 meals for a hospital in Harrow. But they didn't stop there. They've set up the Community Response Kitchen, delivering to hospitals, schools and homeless shelters across London. Now they're delivering between 1,000 and 3,000 meals every day. And they've achieved all this with no funding, just the support of local businesses and local people. To Daksha and Parish and all the local heroes that keep our communities going, the Co-op says thank you.
Formula One is back.
F1 is back on Sky Sports.
It's lights out, and away we go.
And there's never been a season like this before.
How was that fast?
No one knows where this road leads, but it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Down the inside, no, we can't stop into each other.
Are you ready?
Brilliant madness. An absolutely perfect race.
Watch every race live. Upgrade to Sky Sports F1 today. Go to sky.com/F1 for details.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks come off earlier highs, but are still up for a third day as an early trial of an experimental shot from Pfizer and BioNTech showed that it's safe and prompted patients to produce antibodies. The New York-based drug maker led gains in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. FedEx had its biggest ever surge on a closing basis. United Airlines jumped after saying it'll boost its domestic schedule for August. We check these numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P is up 0.4%, up 11. The Dow's little changed, up 3. The NASDAQ is up 0.6%, up 65. The 10-year is down 8/32, the yield 0.68%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.6% at $39.50 a barrel, with the COMEX gold up down 1.7% at $17.6940 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.46. The euro $1.1264, and the British pound $1.2464. OPEC slashed oil production to the lowest level since the Gulf War in 1991 as it escalates efforts to revive global markets just as a resurgence of the coronavirus is threatening demand once again. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, I'd like to welcome to the program now Tom Orlick. He is chief economist for Bloomberg Economics. He covers the global economy, really. He lived, though, for many years in Asia as well. So in a few moments, I want to get his reaction to the new security laws in Hong Kong. First, though, we want to talk to him about his revised global outlook. Goodbye, Victory V. Hello, Worry W. How concerned should we be? W's look nice, but they don't feel nice, Tom.
Yeah, I think there's... It kind of depends on where you're sitting in the world, Vonnie. I was just speaking to our chief European economist this morning. He was pretty cheerful. Germany's doing better. France is doing better. I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C. Things look pretty bleak. The virus case count continues to rise. For the global economy as a whole, though, the thing to keep in mind is that it's difficult to recover on your own, right? Think about a Germany, which has got its case count under control, but who are they going to export to when the U.S. is still in so much trouble? Think about a China. Who are they going to sell to when the U.S. is in so much trouble and when big emerging markets like Brazil and India continue to wrestle with the challenge of getting their pandemic under control? So we were already really pessimistic. We had a negative 4% number for global growth this year. We've come down a bit more. We're now at negative 4.7%.
And Tom, talk to us about what you and the good folks at Bloomberg Economics are thinking about 2021. There's been so much fiscal stimulus. There's been monetary stimulus as well across the globe. What are your thoughts about 2021?
So I think we're looking at a stepped recovery, Paul. So as lockdowns ease, there's going to be an immediate bounce back in activity. So a bunch of stuff that people couldn't do, they're going to be able to do again. A bunch of businesses that were closed are going to open. So we're going to come some of the way back to normal pretty quickly. What's going to happen then is that we're going to find that there are scars from the recession, businesses that went bankrupt, people who lost their jobs who can't find them again. And we're going to find that there's a bunch of activity that people just don't want to do anymore. Are people going to want to go to the theatre? are people going to want to get on an airplane? So there's going to be a ceiling on activity which is lower than before the pandemic took place. So we think we're going to see the beginning of a V, and then things are going to level off, and the sort of return to normal is going to be slower, and the recovery heading into 2021 is going to be slower than first impressions from where we are now at the beginning of the third quarter of 2020.
Do you foresee a time, though, Tom, when things will look what we used to call normal?
I think we're really in the hands of the scientists, Vonnie. Do we find a vaccine? When do we find a vaccine? Do we find an effective treatment? When do we find an effective treatment? When that happens, I think we go back to normal. Before that happens, as we're seeing in China, for example, one of the countries that did successfully get their outbreak under control, even when it seems like things are back to normal, you can have these sporadic local outbreaks. China just had one in Beijing, and the lockdown has to come back into place.
Tom, you did live in Beijing for many years, covering the country from an economic perspective. What is your perspective on what's happening with Beijing, China, and Hong Kong right now? Hong Kong, China seems to have taken, perhaps even surprised the market a little bit with how much control they are asserting in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so I mean, there was an ambiguity to Hong Kong, but it was a constructive ambiguity, right? It was a unique place because it combined Chinese culture, Chinese language, deep ties with the mainland, close connections with the government in Beijing, with a vibrant civil society, international standards of governance. And when you brought those two things together, what you had was a kind of, from an economic perspective, just a really potent growth model, right? Because you had the best of China and you had the best of the world as well. So now it's early days, but it seems like that ambiguity isn't going to be there, right? We're going to have governance which looks much more like governance Chinese style. So Beijing says, this is all positive. We're going to have more stability in Hong Kong. We won't have protests. This is going to be a better business environment. I think the fear is that there's also a cost there. If you take away the vibrancy of civil society, if you take away the international standards of governance, then that takes something away. It takes away one of the drivers of prosperity and success for Hong Kong.
Very quickly, Tom, do you think there will be scores of people taking Boris Johnson up on his offer?
Boris Johnson's offer. I think one of the striking things about the Boris Johnson offer, just to sort of change the lens slightly, is, I recollect that Boris Johnson campaigned vociferously for Brexit, and my understanding is that one of the arguments for Brexit was that the Leave voters were not delighted about having large numbers of immigrants coming into the country. So I was slightly surprised that the main advocate for Leave is now opening the door to 3 million people from Hong Kong. But I think that there's a rich tradition of people from Hong Kong playing an incredibly important and successful part in the British economy. Right. And I think more arrivals from there would be a driver for the UK.
For the UK. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your unique perspective on all things economics and China as well. Tom Orlick, Chief Economist for Bloomberg Economics, giving us his revised downward outlook for the global GDP, the global economic outlook as the pandemic continues to rage. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are climbing after positive coronavirus vaccine developments, better than expected manufacturing data, and a surprise profit from FedEx. Macy's announced that it's taking a $3.1 billion charge as the pandemic weighed on the department store. Macy's said its business has tracked ahead of expectations in the 2 months since the quarter ended. The company said it continues to expect a gradual sales recovery. Amazon Game Studios is pulling its big-budget PC game Crucible from wide circulation after it was widely panned by critics. The game will return to limited release while Amazon works to improve it. And car dealerships typically heavily discount excess inventory for the 4th of July holiday. But the coronavirus makes this year different than most. Vehicle production lines have not yet returned to full capacity, which means that shoppers should not expect to see the jaw-dropping discounts of previous years. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
How long? How much? How many? Financial, policy, and medical experts are working on answers 24/7.
What about public debt?
We are listening to those experts 24/7.
Is the Fed effectively widening this wealth gap with its programs?
Because you want answers too.
What's the most important, the trillions in stimulus, the economy's reopening, or the infections curve bending?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Are you interested?
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone.
Happy birthday!
From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
And action.
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Packed half hour coming up for you. Second quarter figures out from the automakers. Which ones did worse and which ones did, well, less bad? We'll have a look. We'll also be in Washington, D.C. for an interview with John Bolton. That's all coming up. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash now from Greg Jarrett.
Less bad, Bonnie. That's a good way to describe stocks that are still up after positive coronavirus vaccine news. Better than expected manufacturing data and a surprise profit from FedEx. Treasuries and the dollar are both down. We take a look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is just up 0.1% now, well off earlier highs, up 3. The Dow's actually down 0.25% now, down 63, and the Nasdaq is up 0.4%, up 40. The 10-year is down 5/32, the yield 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 1 3/4% at $39.96 per barrel. COMEX gold is down 1.6% at $17.7140 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.45. The euro $1.1261, and the British pound $1.2464. Sources tell us Citigroup is pulling back on plans for returning employees to offices across the U.S. As coronavirus cases surge in many states, the bank will delay bringing back a small percentage of its office workers, according to that source, in 13 states, including Texas, South Dakota, Idaho, and Florida. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Got some auto sales data today. Fiat Chrysler, General Motors reported their U.S. auto sales. I guess they dropped less than expected. Let's get the details. We can do that with Kevin Tynan. He's a senior autos analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. So, Kevin, what are some of your takeaways here as we take a look at auto sales and we take a look at perhaps a signal of how the consumer and the economy is doing right here?
Yeah, and I think for me, looking at the numbers, I think something like Fiat Chrysler gets a little bit lost in that that's a quarterly number, right? So nothing really happened in April and May. And just like in the first quarter, a lot happened in January and February and half of March. But I think, what you're going to get is pretty strong June. If you break out those numbers and can see them monthly, which you can do with some of the Asia-based automakers that are still reporting monthly, like the Hyundai brand out of Hyundai Kia was plus 6% in June. So
okay, let's see what's happened here. We still hold dollar against Japanese yen. Okay. In profit, we still hold British pound against United States dollar. We're already 5,000 pounds in profit. We're still holding. We're still holding Bitcoin position. And I'm looking to sell more short. I'm just waiting for the right price. So we will see. We'll see how much profit we'll make today. I hope you join us and you will follow our trades. There's lots of money available in the Forex market. Speak to you later.
So what you're getting, the incentives are these long-term loans or 0% or deferred payments, which, it looks good and it entices the buyer into the showroom, but really all it does is create negative equity where, you have to own that vehicle even longer, otherwise you're going to continue to owe on it.
So, Kevin, where are we in terms of manufacturing capacity? We know that most of the U.S. auto plants were shut down because of the virus. They're starting to open up right now. Where are we?
Yeah, not very close yet. Looked at the May numbers of production, and it was like a minus, 70, 75%. So we're still, and April was basically zero. Nothing was built in April. May was just under 400,000 units. But to put that in context, May of 2019 was 1.5 million units. So that's about how far away we are.
One of the better performers was Toyota, in fact. Their sales were down 26.7%. The estimate was 33.4%. But the other notable thing about Toyota today is that it became the second most valuable car maker in the world behind Tesla. Now, that might all change as soon as trading starts up again, particularly in Japan, obviously. But what does that say about the whole system? Are we looking at kind of, legacy companies at this point?
I guess it's such a difficult topic. I mean, I've gotten to the point, Vonnie, where I look at ranking auto companies by market cap is like ranking them alphabetically. So, by that measure, Aston Martin is way ahead of Tesla. So, for whatever that's worth. But, if you're going to pick that one measure, yeah, but, talk about volume, talk about profitability, talk about all these other things that we use to value automakers, and you're right, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But, if I'm looking at the fundamentals and the structure of a company, I still kind of like Toyota.
So anyway, just Kevin, thanks so much for joining us. I note that this is going to be something, Vonnie, for Kevin, that Tesla's has a bigger market cap than Toyota, as you were mentioning. And as for tried and true auto analysts, that's got to be tough to swallow.
Yeah, he didn't sound too convinced. So let's just put it that way. We'll see what happens in the trading for the rest of the month. I mean, to a certain extent, these are momentum trades as well, right? So you have something like Toyota's market cap in your views. Our thanks very much to Kevin Tynan, auto expert, but senior autos analyst is his exact title for Bloomberg Intelligence. And this portion of Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. Be the independent advisor you've always wanted to be with all the support you need to get there. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Now, let's get some more from Greg Jarrett.
I am here for you, Vonnie. We're off earlier highs, but stocks are still in the green. That based on hopeful vaccine news. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is just up 0.1%, up 4. The Dow is down 0.3%, now down 76. The NASDAQ is still higher, up 0.5% at 45, up 45. The 10-year is down 5/30 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude is now up 1.1% at $39.69 per barrel. COMEX gold down 1.5% at $17.7370 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.45. The euro, $1.1257. And the British pound, $1.2464. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Vonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, earlier today, the Bloomberg surveillance anchors Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferro, and Lisa Abramowitz, they spoke with former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton about his explosive book and whether he personally briefed President Donald Trump on intelligence, indicating that Russian operatives offered bounties to kill American troops in Afghanistan. He also said Trump's evolving explanation since the publication of the New York Times story signals that the U.S. is ripe for the type of Russian interference that's being alleged. Tom Keene kicks things off by asking Ambassador Bolton about whether he had spoken directly to President Trump about the bounties. Let's listen in.
Did you, late in your term at the White House, did you speak to the president about these matters?
Well, what I said to the Associated Press when that question was asked was no comment. And that's the same thing I'm going to say today. We're embroiled in litigation now over whether I complied with the requirements of the pre-publication review process, which I think I did. I didn't write this book with any intention of putting classified information in it. And I don't think Donald Trump wants to suppress the book because he's worried about foreign governments reading it. He doesn't want the American people to read it. Now, look, with respect to Russia and what they're up to in Afghanistan and a range of places around the world, honestly, this current controversy I could have written about in the book if I didn't face these other difficulties. Susan Rice, the second Obama National Security Advisor, writes today in the New York Times that if she had information like that being reported in the papers. Whether it was totally verified or not, she would have gone into the Oval Office to tell President Obama. So without getting into what I knew or didn't know, I just want to say I agree with Susan Rice on that point. I think that's what the National Security Advisor should do. And let me just make one more point quickly. There are not two categories of intelligence, verified over here and not verified over there. Intelligence invariably is placed along a spectrum, and the intelligence community understands this. They say they have high confidence in some, medium confidence, low confidence. People are going to have to judge, and different agencies will disagree. There's not some block of granite that you carry around to show to the president that's called verified intelligence. There's a range, and you deal with uncertainty. That's part of the job.
I looked, John Bolton, at the Susan Rice essay and also the essay by Leon Panetta. I found them extraordinary in their heat. How would you recommend that President Trump extricate himself from this now, and particularly how he dresses the military at the Pentagon?
Well, I can't offer advice on how to get out of a mess, in effect, he's created. By my count, in the last 4 or 5 days, he's told 3 different stories on whether he was briefed, whether he was told it was fake, whether it's fake news by the New York Times, or a whole range of things. And his advisors are now contradicting themselves as well. How do I view that in terms of the Trump presidency? Look, it's just another day at the office. That's the way it works. Every day is a new day. Every story is a new story. What you said yesterday is interesting, but doesn't necessarily dictate what you say today. What it tells the Russians is we are in disarray and ripe for this kind of provocation, not just in Afghanistan, but in many, many other places around the world.
Ambassador, on this particular intelligence, is there any reason why intelligence like this would be put in the president's daily briefing and it wouldn't be followed up in person directly with the president himself?
Well, I don't want to comment on this specific story and its intelligence implications for the reasons I said a minute ago. I will say this, which I do say in the book. Donald Trump doesn't consume intelligence the way you expect presidents to do so. Everybody's entitled to gather information in their own personal style. Ronald Reagan had his style. George H.W. Bush had his. I'm not saying there's any one that's right or wrong. And I think the presentation of intelligence to the president has to take that style into account. So what I'm talking about here is not does the president read lengthy briefing papers? Does he get it via movies and that sort of thing? The question for Donald Trump is whether he gets it at all. And I think he's uninterested in learning. I think that facts that are inconvenient for him often don't stick, despite repeated tellings. So can he say that he was never briefed on it or that he thinks it's fake and get away with it? We'll see. Maybe he will. But this is a serious problem for the United States. You can say what you want about Joe Biden in policy terms. I think he receives, processes, and retains information. I think with Trump, it's much more questionable.
Ambassador, something that's questionable for a lot of people listening and watching this interview right now is what you chose to put in the book and what you choose not to talk about. So on Russia, no comment. But when it comes to leaning on a foreign leader to help an election coming up in November, you seem to have no problem putting that in the book. Can you walk us through the process through which you decided what to talk about and what you don't want to talk about now?
Well, look, I have a continuing obligation not to reveal classified information, so I'm not going to talk about it. I didn't talk to the press about it during my time in office, and when I wrote the manuscript, I didn't intend to start then. I went through a very lengthy 4-month-long, page-by-page, line-by-line, pre-publication review, at the end of which the government official conducting the review concluded, as the government itself has said in court filings, that there was no classified information in the document. So that's what guides me in terms of classified versus unclassified information. In terms of substance, Simon & Schuster basically said, okay, you can have 500 pages. If they had said you can have 1,000 pages, I probably could have filled that too. Some of the book reviews that I've read complain that there are too many details. I think that's the stuff of history.
Fortunate to have Ambassador Bolton with us live on Bloomberg Surveillance, both on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg TV. Ambassador Bolton, this was in the Wall Street Journal. It came from you. I want to quote it for you. Trump then stunningly turned the conversation to the coming U.S. presidential election, alluding to China's economic capability and pleading with Xi to ensure he'd win. I would print Trump's exact words, but the government's pre-publication review process has decided otherwise. Is this first-hand knowledge? Was that you in the room that overheard the President of the United States do that? Or was that also through an interpreter? Which one was it?
No, that was Donald Trump speaking in English. Actually, he didn't speak in Chinese, and it wasn't interpreted back to us. The sentence that you read was what I agreed in the process of the pre-publication review to describe the exact words that the president used.
Yeah, so John, help me out with this. What did you do in the days and weeks after that? How did you follow up after you overheard the president say that?
Look, there are a lot of things that are done in an effort to keep policy on track. In that case, there were extensive negotiations underway for what turned out to be a partial trade deal. There wasn't any way to take those words back, and I believe in the records of the Chinese government 50, 100 years from now, when they're probably released, you'll see their notes as to what the president said in that meeting. There wasn't any doubt in my mind on the Chinese side. They understood what was going on. It was not the only occasion where this comment about buying agricultural products was made. You have to go on doing the job that you're assigned to do on a variety of fronts, not just how many soybeans China buys in the next year to try and keep policy on track.
Ambassador, this is the big issue, though, that undermines pretty much everything in this book. You were an advisor to this president. You overheard him lean on a foreign leader to help him win an election. You've served several administrations. You have served your country again and again and again. Yet you chose to wait to put this information in a book instead of doing something about it at the time. And I still don't understand why. Why?
Well, I think it's very straightforward. I have done something about it. I've given it to the American people, who are the ultimate judges of Donald Trump's performance. Because of the way the Democrat advocates of impeachment in the House structured their effort, they basically made it impossible for Republicans to participate in an impeachment process that might have led to a different outcome. We have a model for that. This is not some hypothesis. In the Watergate crisis of the Nixon administration, Democrats and Republicans did work together. And while Nixon didn't go through a trial in the Senate, he did conclude he had no choice but to resign. I don't march to Nancy Pelosi's drum. I did what I thought was ultimately in the best interest of the country, because I wasn't going to participate in a completely botched process.
Ambassador, I've got to jump in. I have to jump in. Why was it in the best interest of the United States of America to wait to put this information in a book?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. The fact was that the Democratic leadership, the advocates of impeachment, had built a cliff, and they and a lot of other lemmings were heading toward it. I think it's very clear that had I participated in that because of the malpractice that they were committed, that my testimony would have made no difference. And it's not just my belief. I think this is something that, as you saw in the debate in the Senate, many Republicans bought the White House argument that even if you believed in the quid pro quo, the famous phrase that reverberated through the hearings, even if you believed on the testimony that was given that a quid pro quo had taken place, that conduct by Donald Trump did not rise to the level of an impeachable offense. That is to say, even if he did it, that's not a ground to impeach and convict him. That's a legal argument, and the way that came up was entirely based on the Democratic strategy. Go on a narrow basis, just Ukraine, and rush it through. It turned out that was not only the strategy of the advocates of impeachment, that was Donald Trump's strategy too. And what's the result of the failed strategy? What's the result? The result is not that Donald Trump is deterred from this kind of conduct because he was impeached by the House. He is enabled to do more of this kind of conduct because he was acquitted by the Senate because of the failed impeachment strategy. So now we are left with what I think the framers of the Constitution really intended as the judge of presidential conduct, and that's the American voter.
Ambassador, you've been very critical of President Trump.
And you've been listening there to
the
former National
Democrats
Security
and how
Advisor
they've conducted
John.
the impeachment proceedings. What about Republican leadership? Have they done a good job offering up a check on the president?
Well, I think it's very difficult. The way these past 3.5, 4 years have evolved, for them to be as independent as I think many of them want. A lot of people who are never Trumpers say that the Republican House and Senate leadership is complicit. I don't agree with that. The fact is, nobody wants to be the subject of a Donald Trump 2 minutes hate, to use George Orwell's idea on Twitter. I think we're going to have within the Republican Party a very significant conversation after November 3rd, especially if Trump loses, which is at least a 50-50 possibility at this point, about the future of the party. That's one of the subsidiary purposes of the book in my mind. I want to make it clear that Donald Trump does not represent conservative philosophy. He does not represent the Republican Party. He is an anomaly. And I'm not going to vote for him. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not going to vote for the Republican presidential nominee because I don't think he's really true to our philosophy. I think he's true to Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone. I think a lot of people...
Ambassador, I want to break in here because the polls actually contradict that. The polls actually show that the Republican Party, by and large, has overwhelming support for President Trump, and that's the reason why Republican leadership has, more often than not, hewed to President Trump's ideas and goals. What makes you think that the Republican Party is different than what President Trump has put out there and the polls are saying?
Because public opinion polls take a limited picture based on a limited question by the pollster. Do you support Donald Trump over the Democrats? What I'm talking about is the larger issue of what the party actually believes in. And in my conversations, really across the country for an extended period of time, I don't doubt that in this debate, I think the Trump view will be rejected. I think it's an unfortunate part of our political dialogue today that it's all torqued around Donald Trump. Do you support Trump or do you oppose Trump? And there's really nothing else to discuss. That's bad for the country as a whole, and it's one of the things we need to correct. We'll have to correct it sooner or later. We may be able to correct it shortly after the November election. It may take another 4 years after that, but we are going to have to correct it.
John Bolton, their former National Security Advisor, speaking to the team on Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg TV and radio earlier today. Let's bring in now Craig Gordon, Bloomberg's Washington Bureau Chief and U.S. government.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, look at this pair. It's just going up and up. Okay, we are moving up. Stop on profit to 124,601. It will give me £6,000 in profit already. So while waiting, and what's happened? Japanese yen still same place. Yeah. Let's see our 1 minute chart. Still here. Right. Let's see what's going to happen with this pair, because it gave us really good profit. If you'd like to download our trading strategy, you can go to www.companyi.co.uk/daytradingstrategy.html. Okay, Every week we run a webinar on how we trade. If you want to register, please go to www.companyi.co.uk/webinar.html. We trade, this is quite important, we trade our own and our clients' money. This is live trades, we don't use demo account. 1 pip equal £100 for all pairs, Forex pairs. We show you only one screen, so you can see 5 Forex pairs on this one screen. We cannot show you all trade station with lots of screens. We trade lots of other equities, Forex pairs. So 1 pip equal £100, except Bitcoin. Bitcoin, 1 pip equal £10. Okay, so let's see what's going to happen with British pound, because well, today is very profitable day for anybody who followed our trades and try to catch up with us and make a trade on British pounds, because we're still holding and it's still moving up. Speak to you later.
So what is the situation with our national security apparatus, Craig? Are these all short-term dents to it, or will there be long-term consequences to, failing to ensure that it's watertight?
Yeah, and that was a little bit of what Ambassador Bolton talked about in the interview with Tom Keene, John Farrow, and the folks this morning. Is this is sending a terrible signal to both friend and foe alike, to our allies in Europe and elsewhere. A question of whether we will sort of stand behind them. They have Russia right on their doorstep there. Obviously, Germany and those countries. It's a very present threat. And to our adversaries, a question of whether the United States will kind of be the number one superpower, the top military power in the world. Will it stand behind its actual men and women in the field, in addition to its allies? And so I think for someone like Bolton, who is obviously a pretty controversial figure, he has a lot of detractors, but he's certainly been around this for 20, 30, 40 years in Washington at the highest levels, advising presidents, back to George Bush, et cetera, saying, look, this actually starts to erode our standing in the world. Allies aren't sure they can trust us. Adversaries think they can test us. And that, to John Bolton, is very troubling development out of this.
So, Craig, about 30 seconds. How concerned are the Republicans about losing control of the Senate here coming up in November?
I think with every passing day, more concerned, honestly. I think in the early part of the year, there was a feeling they could probably hold on. Democrats have fielded some very strong candidates, Mark Kelly down in Arizona, a few other places. And also, I think a lot of voters, maybe looking for an alternative to Trump. That may drift down to the lower parts of the ticket where the senators are. I think there's a great deal of concern on Mitch McConnell's part about losing the Senate.
Interesting. Craig Gordon, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have you on again. Lots going on between, obviously, now and November. Craig Gordon is a U.S. government executive editor and Washington bureau chief. So, Vonnie, just fascinating discussion with former Ambassador Bolton with the surveillance team this morning.
Absolutely, and we'll see what emerges from the Gang of Eight meeting. But you can imagine that if it's going to be a bipartisan group like that in a room with the administration are going to try and, strong-arm any sort of public response that might come out of that room, but it would be nice to be a fly on the wall.
Yes, it would be. Just looking at the markets here, very quiet here. We have the S&P up 12 points, the Dow up 2 points, and the NASDAQ up 64 points. That's about 0.6%. Coming up, Bloomberg, Balance of Power with David Weston. That's coming up in just a moment. Stay tuned. This is Bloomberg.
From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, this is Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We'll get started today with a check on the markets. For that, we go to Abigail Doolittle. So, Abigail, a little bit up, but not very decisively so on the first day of the new quarter.
Wishy-washy indeed, David. Investors really not knowing what to make of this year because, of course, that first quarter, huge down quarter, brief bear market, and then the last quarter, the best quarter for the S&P 500 since 1998. So here we are very small moves for stocks overall. lots of uncertainty, despite the fact that we had that better than expected ADP number, ISM coming in stronger than expected, suggesting that the manufacturing part of the economy is back in expansion. But again, wait and see mode, and perhaps worrisome for the bulls, David. The sector composition earlier had been bullish, but now we're taking a look at some of the cyclical sectors trading to the downside. Energy down about 1.7%, even though oil is higher, and the financials are also down, even though yields are higher. So again, a little bit of a pause, investors wanting to make sense of what's going on. Of course, that big jobs report tomorrow, and it is a holiday shortened week, so some traders may already actually just be taking off, especially after all of the action earlier this year, David.
Yeah, exactly. It's been exhausting for traders. So you mentioned that we had the best quarter, last quarter, second quarter, we've had since 1998. At the same time, that might not be necessarily good news, because I saw a note from you that said, historically, if you go back to really big shifts in the market, often there's a retest of the bottom.
Yes, there is. And if you go back to the Great Depression, there was a retest about 6 months, 7 months after the low made in 1929. Similar situation in the bear market in mid-1970s. In 2000, there were several tests that went lower. 1987, even the long-term capital crisis, 2008. So all of history does suggest that we're likely to see some sort of a significant testing of the S&P 500 lows. There are also some options experts that I frequently talk to that think that there's signs of some sort of a correction coming. When that may come, however, David, is unclear, because it seems as though investors are really just going with the Fed and the central bank liquidity. So unless there is some sort of a systemic shock, and let's hope that there's not, that sort of undoes what the Fed has been able to implement here and support markets, it seems as though stocks want to go higher. But history does suggest each and every time in the past that there's been a bear market that there will be some sort of test of the lows, David.
Yeah, I think we've had our share of systemic shocks already this year. Thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle. Well, the markets seem to be caught between a virus that just won't go away and stimulus that seems to know no bounds. To get a read on really where things are and where they're headed, we turn now to Wall Street Week contributor Afsani Beshlos. She is the founder and CEO of Rock Creek Group. So, Afsani, it's always great to have you with us. You have a great new note out this week. It's called Tug of War, which sort of illustrates what I was just saying. What's an investor to do caught in between these two really powerful forces?
Investors are very confused, as you said. And I think the data that they're seeing is as confusing as the data that the Fed is seeing, David. What is happening also is that investors were always keeping like a 70-30 or a 60-40 portfolio in the old days, where whether you were a pension fund or an individual, you kept a certain share of stocks and bonds. And now you're seeing that your bond portfolio is going to earn you zero. So suddenly, I think a lot of individuals are pushing themselves into investing more in the equity market. So part of it is the psychology. Part of it is the physical fact that you're not earning any return on your bonds, unlike the last 10 years. So you have to find some returns. And that is one of many reasons that people are moving in this direction. Pension funds, on the other hand, and institutional investors are being a little bit more careful. They are keeping their relative shares of equities still at the lower end. And so if you look at sophisticated and more institutional money, it's going a different direction than retail.
Are people just holding on to more cash, not sure exactly what to do? It doesn't seem to be worth it to reinvest it in bonds right now with almost zero returns, but equities are fairly valued, I think.
Absolutely. And I think what has happened is also it's sort of a barbell, as you said, cash and equities. The other side, and the numbers that you were just going through, David, with Abigail, show that, in fact, while markets had one of their best quarters just now, 5 stocks, if you look at the S&P 500, went up about 20%. The other 495 stocks were, in fact, down 4%. And if you went globally, you would see the same facts. And I think there's a huge push. We have seen that really in the last 10 years, since 2010, but very exaggerated at very rapid speed in the last 3-4 months, where people have been moving into mega stocks. So the share of mega stocks in the US in 2010 was 5% of, let's say, MSCI, and now it is close to 36-37%. So that shows you that people are moving into a very different direction, and that is sort of another indication why small companies are not doing as well, small businesses are not doing as well.
And if Sonny, it may be just as simple as I'm going to go to a really big company because I'm pretty confident they're going to survive what happens because of the coronavirus, because that is always out there lurking and is an unknown, and you want to make sure you're investing in companies that are going to make it.
Absolutely. And I think the same thing is happening throughout the whole economy. So the reason the investors invest in the bigger companies is they want them to be around, right? Uncertainty is at such high levels. So I think that is one element. And by the way, I was talking to our friend, Alan Greenspan. And Alan, I'm very fortunate, is one of our senior advisors at Rock Creek. And he reminded me of the whole conversation that he had a long time ago about irrational exuberance. So we should put that in this bucket also, because irrational exuberance has also been pushing people, as well as moving into the larger stocks that will be around in 5 years. So I think both factors are pushing people into that part of the economy.
I also want to talk to you about something you've been focused on for a good long time, and that is ESG, environmental social governance. As we try to pick through, investors try to look for the places to put their money in this very difficult time. How much is that really coming to the fore, particularly because of the coronavirus? It really has driven us, particularly on the things like social, that perhaps we weren't as focused on before.
Social has become very important because everybody, every family, every person is involved with their health crisis and their financial crisis and their health crisis. They're seeing that the coming together of technology and telemedicine, but also technology and the huge data that has allowed us to move towards a vaccine and towards a treatment for this COVID-19 has been so interesting, so different than the development of any other vaccine. And we're seeing there are a lot of announcements the last couple of days about the social part being actually the part that has been getting capital. So you have seen a lot of money go into the health sector by very sophisticated investors. And it's not seen as just something that you're throwing away. It's actually seen as some of the highest return areas for investment.
Is there enough reporting from publicly traded companies to really give investors an accurate read on their rating on environment, on social that you've just been talking about as a governance? Because that seems to be a problem. There's no uniformity, is there, of reporting?
So at Rock Creek, what we realized is that if you look at let's say the Bloomberg indicators, or you look at MSCI or look at the Rock Creek ones, they're all going to end up in different places. So we came up with a technology that is basically going to look at each of these factors and rate using the different rating systems. So if you use the Bloomberg system that has done a lot on sustainability, we can apply the technology and use those factors. We can use our own factors because, as you said, there is, as of today, no one agreed upon methodology and not one agreed upon way of measuring impact when it comes to either social or even the governance part of this. The part that is very easy to measure, obviously, is the environmental part. Then it's the governance part to some extent, but that has some sort of cushy areas that are harder to measure. And then obviously the social is the hardest. But I can tell you, I was doing social shadow pricing in the 1990s at the World Bank, and it is still very relevant. And you can use some of that methodology for coming up with social measurements.
And finally, Afsane, one other item that you raised in your note, and that is the apparent, if it's a word, de-urbanization. People really increasingly moving away from cities because of their various factors, even before COVID-19, certainly exacerbated here. What does that say to investors? What does that make more attractive for an investor?
So I think housing has been a big problem for investors and for all of us. So if you look at housing, most of the money that has gone into housing has gone into luxury housing, and very little has gone into affordable housing, and that has resulted in major problems in cities where the supply of affordable housing has gone down, and also housing even for middle-income families such as firefighters, people who are fighting for us on the front lines, teachers, has not really been available and has taken more than half of their income. So you're finding both the economic effects of inequality that we've been talking about, as well as the fact that COVID is telling you you do need to social distance. You saw that density of population leads to more disease, is pushing people. And that has led to huge number of new contracts in housing.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Afsaneh. Always great to have you with us, Afsaneh Beschloss. She is the founder and CEO of Rock Creek Group. And a program note now, at 9 p.m. Eastern Time Friday evening, we're going to have a Bloomberg special called Unequal America. We'll take a look at the great and growing economic inequality in the country. That's coming up at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Bloomberg, and you can also catch it online. Meantime, right here, we're going to take a look at the new Hong Kong security law and what exactly it has done. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
It's the people with it.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow. Because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the? Every Tuesday at KFC. Participating restaurants ends 18th of August 2020. Tuesdays only, subject to availability, not available online.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
When the world stopped, people in our local communities didn't. At the Co-op, we want to say thank you to all the local heroes. Daksha wanted to help the NHS, so she and her husband Parish cooked 50 meals for a hospital in Harrow. But they didn't stop there. They've set up the Community Response Kitchen, delivering to hospitals, schools and homeless shelters across London. Now they're delivering between 1,000 and 3,000 meals every day. And they've achieved all this with no funding, just the support of local businesses and local people. To Daksha and Paresh and all the local heroes that keep our communities going, the Co-op says thank you.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races. We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
On air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks very much, Mark. Well, a new security law went into effect today in Hong Kong, and overnight 300 people were arrested, although only 9 of those were under the new law. To explain to us how things have changed in Hong Kong because of this new law, welcome now Stephen Orland. He is president of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. So, Steve, welcome. Great to have you with us. For those of us who are not really very current with exactly what's changed, what does this new law do that the old law didn't?
Well, the new law was kind of enacted as a result of these democracy demonstrations that, from the perspective of a bunch of people in Hong Kong, were blocking the ability of businesses to do business. Airports got closed, subways got closed down. But the demonstrators were interested in democracy. They were interested in kind of having a more direct say in the rule of Hong Kong. What the law does is it prevents what the NPC, the National People's Congress, is saying: separatism, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign governments, with foreign countries. The trouble is it's very ambiguously worded, and it gives the authorities a lot of power to target activists. So what happened in the last 24 hours, as you pointed out, is people did things which, if they did them 36 hours ago, would have been legal. So if you hold up a flag which says you want an independent Hong Kong, that now becomes advocating separatism and becomes illegal. So the police got instructions to arrest those people, and as you point out in your newscast, 9 of the people got arrested. So it's a new world. One of the good things that happened is the law was not made retroactive. So if you demonstrated yesterday and you advocated independence, you are not arrested for what you did prior to when the law was enacted. But if you do something subsequently, they then can use your behavior prior to midnight last night to demonstrate, to argue for a stronger sentence, to kind of argue that you're a recidivist and need to be detained for a longer period of time. So for terms of the media, in terms of activists, in terms of democracy activists, it's a dark day.
So that's in terms of politics, in terms of the social order. What about in terms of business? How's the business community likely to react? I mean, you have an extensive business background at Carlyle, at Lehman, things like that. How are Hong Kong businesses going to react to this? Is this bad for them? Is it good for them? Do they know?
I think they don't know. The businesses I've talked to are basically taking a wait-and-see attitude. Is this really going to affect their ability to do the business that they do, to retain talent? In other words, both the UK has now offered hundreds of thousands of people in Hong Kong the ability to emigrate to the UK, something that they didn't do in 1997. The United States is talking about doing something similar. If that gets done, then you're going to have a talent emigration. You're going to have an outflow of talent, and that's going to affect your ability to do business. If media is constrained the way it is in China, that if in my old business at Carlyle and at Lehman Brothers, I needed a free media to tell me what was going on so that I can take that reporting and put it together with kind of our micro analysis of individual companies. If that is restricted, that is going to have a major effect on financial services businesses in Hong Kong, which is very important. Having said that, what we've seen in the lead up to the passage of this law is a huge influx of capital market activities into the Hong Kong market. I think, Bloomberg, you've reported that it's $20 billion of new issues. That's being driven, one, by a desire to show support of Hong Kong. Second, by U.S. activities that are causing Chinese companies to question whether they're going to be able to continue their listings in the United States. So oddly, we are taking positions which require, by saying, if you don't have this, if you don't allow the accountants to have access to your records, you're not going to be able to stay listed in the United States. Well, what that's doing, it pushed Alibaba, JD.com, NetEase to do these secondary listings in Hong Kong, which is great for Hong Kong. That's business for the Hong Kong exchange. It's business for lawyers in Hong Kong. It's business for accountants in Hong Kong, for consultants in Hong Kong. So oddly enough, some of this tension in the U.S.-China relations, which is generally very bad for Hong Kong, in this case is not bad for Hong Kong.
Isn't that ironic? At the same time, Steve, finally here, is there much the United States can do about this? We hear a lot of complaints coming out of lawmakers, some activity up in the Senate and things like that. But is there much the United States can really do to affect China's behavior in Hong Kong that doesn't hurt the United States every bit as much as it hurts Beijing?
Well, I think that's a very good point. Some of what we're doing hurts the United States more than it hurts Beijing. What most troubles me about a lot of these kind of policy prescriptions is it's hurting the people of Hong Kong. That it's not hurting the people who have put forth this bill, who have kind of put in place what are excessive measures to deal with the issues of separatism, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign countries. Not punishing them. It's punishing the average person in Hong Kong. Decisions like not allowing the Google cable to go to Hong Kong. Is that really punishing the Chinese? I would argue it's punishing the folks who work in technology in Hong Kong, which basically supports the people of Hong Kong. So we need to be careful when we craft these policies that we not punish the people of Hong Kong. We punish the people who are behind these policies.
Okay, Steve, really appreciate you being with us. That was fascinating. Steve Orleans, he's the president of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. Coming up later in this program, we're going to talk with General Stanley McChrystal about those reports about possible bounties placed by Russia on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
You may not be getting on planes yet.
At what point do we start to see this elusive V-shaped recovery?
But for detailed, up-to-the-minute news of Asia, you don't have to.
Do you think that the tension has the possibility to destabilize Asian assets?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do you expect some of these companies that come and list here to then delist in New York?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for Stock of the Hour, and is Pfizer. Its shares are rising on news that it, along with its German partner, have done some tests of a potential vaccine for the COVID-19 virus that have been encouraging. To explain it all to us, we welcome now Kaylee Lines. Kaylee?
Yeah, David, it's absolutely right. They tested a possible COVID-19 vaccine candidate on 45 adults, and the early results indicate that it's safe and it prompted an antibody development in all of the patients, the highest level of antibodies showing up in the group that got 2 shots of the product. So this sets them up pretty well in the race to develop a vaccine against the coronavirus. Broadly, analysts on the street pretty positive on the news today, agreeing that it seems promising, though some, including our own analyst here at Bloomberg Intelligence, very rightly pointing out that it's a little bit too early to celebrate. There's a long way to go to prove that it can actually protect against the infection. As for what comes next, David, they have 3 other candidates in the pipeline. The one that works the best will move on to the next stage. That could start as soon as August, and those trials could be as large as 30,000 patients.
Yeah, and Kaylee, just briefly here, does this help the other candidates or hurt the other candidates? Because does it mean, is it rising tide lifts all boats, or, oh my, they're going to win, we're going to lose?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, David, because actually a number of companies that are developing other vaccine candidates are lower today. I'm thinking Inovio, Moderna, they're all actually down on this Pfizer news. I was reading research from one analyst over at Evercore ISI, who said the third quarter is going to be all about vaccines, because we know there are a number of companies racing to get one on the market, David.
Yeah. We'll look forward to that for sure, and you'll report to us. That's Kaylee Lines. Thanks so much. Coming up next, it's coming up for the 10th anniversary of Dodd-Frank. We're going to talk with one of the principal architects of that statute. He's Michael Barr of the University of Michigan, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mostly higher. Pfizer is up nearly 5% after early trials of an experimental coronavirus vaccine showed it to be safe and effective. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has agreed to meet with the civil rights groups who organized an advertising boycott of the platform. Starbucks, PepsiCo, and Diageo are among the most recent companies to say they're curtailing ad spending. Part of the exodus is aimed at pushing Facebook to suppress posts that glorify violence and misinform the public. And the world's most valuable automaker still starts with a T, but it's not Toyota. Tesla has moved into the top spot as its market value has topped $207 billion. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 1 point, NASDAQ up 69, S&P 500 up 12. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org. work.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
How long will it take for the economy to recover?
How many of them have remained on the job throughout this?
People are not going to be in public transportation.
Nobody knows.
You have received £600 million from the UK.
But we can promise the most complete information and the most detailed...
The question is, what kind of recovery will it be?
Through every twist and turn.
Would you be wary of investment in China at this point?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It is time now for First Word News, and for that we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you very much. New York City will delay reopening of indoor restaurant dining, which had been planned for July 6th. Mayor Bill de Blasio said today the decision was made with the state. The mayor says he wants to help restaurants survive, but it has to be done safely and outdoors. The UK will take a chance on raising tensions with China even more. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government will allow almost 3 million Hong Kong citizens to move to the UK. The Prime Minister made the announcement the same day China's new Hong Kong security law took effect. Mr. Johnson says the law violates the 1984 agreement on the city between the UK and China. Russian President Vladimir Putin is on a track for a big win. An exit poll shows that 76% of voters support a revised constitution that would allow Mr. Putin to stay in office until 2036. President Putin's current mandate expires in 2024. His approval ratings have slumped while Russia's economy reels under the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Well, July 21st will mark the 10th anniversary of Dodd-Frank, that legislation that was enacted trying to make sure we didn't have a repeat of that great financial crisis we had back in 2008, 2009. For a review of Dodd-Frank, we welcome now Dean Michael Barr. He is the Dean of the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. And Dean Barr was one of the principal architects of Dodd-Frank when he was working at Treasury back around the time of the great financial crisis. Dean Barr, thank you so much for joining us. Give us your sense now of Dodd-Frank, how it's held up, and particularly how it's holding up in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis, something no one could have anticipated.
Well, I think that's right. We don't really know exactly how the future risks are going to play out. We certainly didn't anticipate 10 years ago that there would be a global pandemic today. But the framework that was put in place in Dodd-Frank, I think, has been quite resilient. It established a much safer system, a fairer system than we had before. But I want to say that, our financial system is not really safe enough or fair enough yet. And there are more risks to come in the financial system. I think we still need to work on a financial system that works better for households and businesses. And we're not there yet. I think that on the positive side, go ahead.
No, please, you go ahead.
I think on the positive side, there's a lot more capital in the system, so there are bigger buffers in the system in the event of failure. And that makes the financial system more resilient. You've seen the major financial institutions and community banks able to lend in this economy to businesses and households, which is so critical to us in this period. And I think the issue is, are we going to have the resilience we need to make it all the way through the crisis? And there, I think there's some uncertainty that was revealed in the last round of stress tests.
Well, let's talk about the stress test. That's exactly where I wanted to go, because I think everyone pretty much agrees that banks are so much stronger and healthier than they were back in 2008. Good on you. That's terrific. At the same time, are they tough enough, the stress test? One of the ways that we're trying to implement Dodd-Frank, and does it really contemplate the possibility of an L kind of shaped recovery rather than a U or a V?
I think that's exactly the right question. Look, in my view, in the last few years, I think that the Trump administration appointees have really lightened up in ways that I think were inappropriate, both on the stress tests on an aspect of capital and liquidity rules. And so the stress tests were not strong enough coming into COVID-19. Obviously, the COVID-19 situation just completely upended any of the models that were in those tests. And so the Fed included a component of looking at the particular effects of this crisis. And as you suggest, they mostly focused on a V path or a W path of recovery and didn't really get to an even worse case scenario, an L path, where we just stay at a low level of growth for an extended period of time. And my own view is it would have been smart to do that. I think the other problem with the stress test is that they did not release individual results about those COVID scenarios. And the thing that is reassuring to the market and helpful to the public is to actually have data on particular institutions. That's why the 2009 stress tests in the midst of the financial crisis, I think, were successful at calming the market because they were transparent. And there's really a lack of transparency here. I think the other issue coming out of the stress test is that although the Fed, coming out of the stress test, agreed to block share buybacks, they're letting the largest financial institutions continue to pay out dividends, which is depleting capital at a time when we need them to be conserving capital or perhaps, I would argue, raising more capital.
One of the issues that popped up right at the beginning of this crisis was the problem with the short-term funding markets, things like repos and money market funds. Did the system hold up adequately there? On the one hand, the Fed stepped in and sort of fixed the problem. On the other hand, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, did it really, FSOC, do the job that you hoped it would do, or did it fall down a little bit on the job?
I think that a critical issue has been the lack of serious reform of money market funds. Coming out of the financial crisis, we didn't include that in Dodd-Frank because the SEC had the authority to undertake the necessary reforms. And eventually the SEC took some steps, but those were not steps that were serious enough to deal with the extent of problems in money market funds. And I think you saw that right at the very beginning of this crisis. Treasury and the Fed stepped in right away to provide support for that sector. I think similarly, the disruption you saw in March of this year largely arose because of highly leveraged hedge fund activity in the Treasury markets. And, the lack of FSOC attention to hedge fund issues, I think, is a serious mistake. So I think there's a lot more work to do. As I said, the Dodd-Frank Act itself is not perfect, but I think the framework is resilient. What we need are regulators and institutions that are, up to the task of keeping us safe.
Yeah, Dean Barr, you mentioned the fact that we need, actually, if anything, more protection. We had a constitutional challenge to the CFPB, which was an integral part of the protection for consumers here. It was rebuffed, although they said the president could fire the head of the CFPB. Is that a robust enough institution at this point to do the job that you anticipated it should do?
Yes, I think the CFPB, the Consumer Bureau, is quite strong. Even after the Supreme Court ruling, it maintains independent funding, independent rule writing, and supervision. There are a wonderful group of career staff in that agency who are looking out for households. You have kind of a crowdsourcing mechanism there where the public weighs in through the consumer complaint database that's public. You have state attorneys general able to enforce federal law. So I think the basic framework is there. I think what we've seen in the last few years, though, is that, again, the Trump administration appointees have rolled back a number of protections, for example, on payday lending, enforced arbitration clauses. They've weakened enforcement. And I think that needs to be reversed. And particularly right now in the COVID crisis, we've got millions of people who are potentially exposed to abuse. We need an agency that's looking out for them right now.
Okay, thank you so much. Really great to have you with us. That is Dean Michael Barr of the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan, one of the architects of Dodd-Frank. And a programming note now, at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, we're going to premiere a Bloomberg special. It is called Unequal America. It'll take a look at economic inequality in this country, how it is growing, what could be done about it. That's a Bloomberg special on Unequal America. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Time here on Bloomberg and also online. Now, coming up right here on this program, we're going to have an exclusive chat with General Stanley McChrystal about the crises facing America today. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks advance as positive vaccine developments and better than expected manufacturing data offset concern over a jump in coronavirus cases. Treasuries and the dollar are down. Yes, the S&P extended gains into a third day as an early trial of an experimental shot showed it's safe and prompted patients to produce antibodies.
Okay, let's see what's happened with British pound against United States dollar, and it's moving up. So I will move further up to 124.70.1. That goes somewhere here. Okay. So we'll see. By the way, to see our past trading sessions, go to SG Trader channel and press playlist. You'll see thousands saved live trading sessions and also profit we made. We keep them free for you and our customers who purchased our strategy and want to practice on our past performance. So you're welcome to have a look. As always, if you want to get the strategy, you can go to company.co.uk website and then click on link trading strategy. I'll speak to you later. We'll see what's happened in about half an hour or hour with British pound.
General McChrystal, thank you very much for being back with us. Appreciate it. I'm not going to ask you about the specifics of Afghanistan, but what does it tell us about where we are in Afghanistan? We're still over there. It seems like we can't quite get out. Why is Afghanistan strategically important for the United States?
Well, it's a great question because you could argue that it's over in the middle of nowhere. It's a landlocked country that doesn't have a tremendous number of resources that we are required to have. Traditionally, it was part of the Great Game, and so Britain and Russia fought over it as a buffer zone to protect British India. For us, I think it's more of a global idea. It's the idea that we went there in 2001 on our decision after the the 9/11 attacks. We basically overthrew the government, the Taliban government, and then we felt we had a moral requirement to stay there to help them put together a new government, and also a practical requirement to help get some stability in the world. Now, we can argue that it's far enough away that it just doesn't matter. I am not in that camp, but it's hard to stand and say that it is right at a key place in the world that we have to have. So I won't try to make that argument.
Is it strategically vital to Russia, on the other hand? I mean, they went back in there over in the 80s, and they got their nose bloodied, I think it's fair to say. At the same time, they can't quite let it go either. Or is this more a matter of trying to really get at the United States through a surrogate?
I really think it's more the latter. I think Russia would like to tweak our noses a little bit where they can. They've done that in the past. Remember in the 1980s, of course, that was during the Cold War, but we funded the Mujahideen. We gave them stingers, in fact, which was one of the reasons the Soviet attempt to remain in Afghanistan failed. So there's a history there, and I'm sure that there's a tremendous number of people in Russia that would like to do the same to us.
And General McChrystal, what about the notion of putting bounties on foreign soldiers' heads? Is that outside the rules of war? Is that different from simply arming people who will use the weapons to kill our soldiers?
Well, I think it's a difference without a distinction. I think that it's not a good thing, particularly if we are, going to have good relations with Russia, theoretically. But at the same time, it's the kind of thing that has been done historically for a long time. So I don't think we should be outraged by the act. What we should do is put that into our calculations of our relationship with Russia. And an ally or someone you do business with doesn't do that to you. And so I think that should color how we react to the entire Russian Federation.
And if this proves out to be plausible intelligence, supportable intelligence, is there an impetus to have to do something to react? Because otherwise you're sending a message to Russia, which, as you say, is not an ally at this point, that we are weak.
I think we've got to show that that's not the kind of thing that we will tolerate, particularly quietly. I mean, you can start by just making public pronouncements if you have good enough intelligence to do that. You can do some things on the ground that push back in other places in the world as well. This is a chess game for years between great nations. So I think there are things we can do. We've got to signal that we are firm. We don't have to signal that we are vengeful, but we have to signal that we cannot be trifled with.
General McChrystal, to broaden this out, to talk about leadership more broadly, I mean, you have done it, you have led, you have written about it, you've studied it. Tell us about the leadership we need right now. We have a rather unusual circumstance with perhaps 3 different crises facing the country at the same time. A pandemic, an economic crisis that followed on the pandemic, and also civil strife, really, over the continued systemic racism. What sort of leadership do we need right now? And maybe more important, what kind of followers do we need? Because often we learn as much about us in crisis as we do about our leaders. After 9/11, I think we learned some things about the United States of America that were encouraging.
I think that's right. David, I think what we need, I'll start with followers, is we need to be the citizens that we believe citizens should be, how we treat fellow Americans, how we treat fellow people in the world. We need to be the followers we would like to have if we were in a leadership position. We need to understand that sometimes things are hard, and they're hard for everybody, and we've got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and move forward. I think we have a tendency to be selfish sometimes. I think we have a tendency to be myopic, and that is beneath the American character. I think we are better than that. I know we are better than that, and we can do it. What kind of leadership do we need to do that? We don't need a particularly anointed person as leader. The woman or man that leads the United States doesn't have to be brilliant, doesn't have to have all the answers. They have to have 2 things. They have to have character, and I call that the amalgamation of values, integrity, steadiness. And they have to have judgment. They have to be able to surround themselves with people better informed and smarter than they are that can influence them toward the right outcome. No one person's going to walk in with all the answers or solutions. That's just not realistic. And when you study history, it's never been the case, although we sometimes want to cast it in that light. So I think we need to be thinking about a leader who pulls a team together, team around them to govern, and then a team of the United States. You know, as bad as COVID-19, it's an extraordinary opportunity It's an external threat facing every country in the world essentially the same way. It ought to be the most unifying pressure we've ever gotten because it's a them that we don't have to hate. We can use it to unify ourselves. We can use it to galvanize people into action. The things like the economic challenges that it creates are also things that we should roll up our sleeves and say, these are hard, but we will work our way through them. So I actually think it ought to be an opportunity for us to show us who we are to ourselves, who we are, and for leaders to stand up and ask us to do that.
So, General McChrystal, you refer to history, and I think there's a tendency to look back over American history and say we've had some pretty bad crises before, but there has been some outstanding leader that stepped up. FDR during World War II, Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, the Founding Fathers, you could name them, back during the Revolution. As we approach our nation's birthday here, is that putting too much pressure on individuals at this point? Do we need an Abraham Lincoln, an FDR, George Washington right now to pull us through this?
Well, if you looked at Abraham Lincoln's career before his election in 1860, it was not that impressive, one-term congressman. If you look at Franklin Roosevelt, although governor of New York, in many ways he wasn't taken seriously by many people in the Democratic Party or the world. And the point I'm making is often the circumstances in which they are put make the person. We would never remember Abraham Lincoln if it had not been for the Civil War. But the reality is they rose to the occasion. Look at Abraham Lincoln, surrounded himself with the famous team of rivals. He had to work his way through a tremendous number of mistakes in the first 3 years of the Civil War before he finally gets comfortable in the job and can actually carry it forward. But all the time, he has values, he has character. All the time, he is trying to do the right thing. So I think that we don't have to wait for a person on riding a white steed to come down that is going to save us from our problems. I think we just need someone who can pull us together. We can do it. We just need to be unified to be given the opportunity to do it.
Well, and finally, for now, at least, General McChrystal, give us an insight into your leadership, because there's a terrible tendency, I think, for leaders to wish themselves to success. Someone once told me that's the worst mistake you can make in business, at least. How do you separate the facts and look at the cold, hard facts, even though you want so badly for it to be different?
Well, that's right. And sometimes leaders are accused of lying, but in reality, they're often lying to themselves. They're just describing things as they wish they were. I made a lot of mistakes in my career, and I keep making them, and it just bedevils me. As I get older, and one of the things I've learned is there's really nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. Somebody comes to you with the answer, and they say, oh, leader, what's the answer to this? And if you don't know, just say, I don't know. Let's find somebody who does. People will understand that and respect the honesty of it. I also think that when you make a mistake, the first person you have to admit it to is you. Because we have this tendency to say, well, I didn't really screw it up, or it wasn't really a mistake, but you know it was. So the first person you have to convince is you. And then I think it's okay to tell the team, hey, I got it wrong. I made a mistake here. Now, in some cases, we worry we're going to lose legitimacy or credibility because we've got this idea that great leaders are perfect. They are not. And I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm very happy to admit that I am so far from perfect, I can't even see it from here. But one thing is, if we all keep trying to be better, if you go to bed every night saying, I didn't do that well today, but I won't make those mistakes tomorrow.
General McChrystal, that's terrific. I'll add one more, that I've learned to listen to people who've done it like you've done it. And so it's really important to listen to you. Thank you so much to General McChrystal of the McChrystal Group. We're going to continue with him over on radio in our second hour. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now the My Hunter Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Hunter Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Earlier today, John Bolton, the former national security advisor to President Trump, appeared on Bloomberg Television and Radio for an extensive discussion about his experience in the White House. One of the things he talked about was negotiations with the Chinese, how he was in the room, and in fact, it was complicated, but in fact, President Trump was really asking for soybean purchases as part of the deal with the Chinese.
There are a lot of things that are done in an effort to keep policy on track. And in that case, there were extensive negotiations underway for what turned out to be a partial trade deal. There wasn't any way to take those words back. And I believe in the records of the Chinese government 50, 100 years from now, when they're probably released, you'll see their notes as to what the president said in that meeting. There wasn't any doubt in my mind on the Chinese side. They understood what was going on. It was not the only occasion where this comment about buying agricultural products was made. You have to go on doing the job that you're assigned to do on a variety of fronts, not just how many soybeans China buys in the next year, to try and keep policy on track.
That was John Bolton, former national security advisor to President Trump, speaking earlier on Bloomberg Television and Radio. In the second hour of Balance of Power on Radio, we're going to have more with General McChrystal about the naming of U.S. bases for Confederate war generals. We'll also talk with Representative French Hill of Arkansas. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Men's makeup is going mainstream in America. CVS, the country's biggest drugstore chain, is adding a cosmetics line from Strix to 2,000 stores, or about a quarter of its total. The retailer is giving more legitimacy to a small but growing group of products that had mainly been sold through high-end stores such as Neiman Marcus. Chalk it up to quarantine boldness or the Zoom effect and the continued evolution of traditional masculinity that's already created a $9.3 billion U.S. men's grooming and skincare market. Kanye West is going to make Gap cool again. Head-turning rapper and designer whose sneaker line with Adidas routinely sells out and was valued at $3 billion last year will work with Gap on a new line of apparel for men, women, and kids called Yeezy Gap. West's compensation will be tied to sales with up to 8.5 million shares of equity if the line achieves $700 million during the fiscal year. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Working from home, take a little more time for breakfast. Tom Keene.
How will this pandemic change your NASDAQ?
Jonathan Farrow.
When you look at that sector, some of these companies won't exist, will they?
And Lisa Abramowitz.
They've only continued to increase the delinquencies and defaults.
Crunch data topped with fresh world news. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. And now, watch us on Bloomberg Television.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking. Now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is an update on Wall Street. First trading day of the second half of 2020. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing right now. Stocks are climbing as positive vaccine developments and better than expected manufacturing data offset concern over a jump in coronavirus cases. Treasuries and the dollar fell. S&P 500 index extending gains into a third day as an early trial of an experimental shot from Pfizer and BioNTech showed it is safe and prompted patients to produce antibodies. Right now, shares of Pfizer, they are trading higher by 4.7%. BioNTech shares, they're up now by 6.9%. Here's where equity markets stand. S&P up 17, a gain of 0.5%. The Dow up 13 points, up by about 0.1%. NASDAQ's up 84, that is a gain of 0.8%. 10-year down 4/30 seconds with a yield of 0.66%. Gold is down 0.6% right now, $17.70 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.3%, $39.78 a barrel. Brent, the global benchmark, now at $42 a barrel, up by 1.8%. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson. Some of the other stories that we're following today with the economic bellwether FedEx is jumping on a surprise profit. FedEx shares surging by 12.2%. Boeing is weighing on the Dow Jones Industrial Average after a government watchdog report found that the company provided, quote, only limited information on the flight control software, later implicated in 2 fatal crashes on the 737 MAX as it was being approved by federal regulators. So again, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, they are all pushing higher again. Recapping the numbers for you, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, little changed and higher. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by 1 point. We've got the S&P up by 15. That is a gain of 0.5%. NASDAQ Composite Index up 83, higher now by 0.8%. And some of the other stories that we are following for you today, FedEx shares rallying after a surge in health equipment deliveries and an efficiency drive aimed at home deliveries propelled earnings beyond Wall Street's expectations. The Courier said it held costs in check with a mix of job cuts, reduced incentive compensation, aircraft retirements, and delays to some investment projects. Again, FedEx shares, they're pushing higher by 12.1%. United Airlines Holdings is higher after saying it will boost its domestic schedule for August to 48% of last year's level, up from 30% in July, in another sign of rebounding travel demand. Again, recapping here, S&P up 16, a gain of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
New hopes for a vaccine after promising early trials. The new Hong Kong security law goes into effect, and President Trump says he'll veto a defense bill if it includes taking the names of Confederate generals off of U.S. bases. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Problems of systemic racism have come to the fore once again after the tragic killing of George Floyd. Beyond questions of policing and socioeconomic differences, much of the focus has been on symbols, such as statues of Confederate generals and the naming of a prominent Princeton school after President Woodrow Wilson. And now a Senate committee has passed a defense authorization bill that would strip U.S. military bases of the names of generals who fought for the South. General Stanley McChrystal of the McChrystal Group has remained with us for our second hour. General McChrystal, thank you for staying with us. And let's talk about symbols, but I'm really drawn to a chapter in your book, also an essay that you wrote on Robert E. Lee and your experience with Robert E. Lee and his image. You might tell our audience about that if they have not heard the story.
Absolutely. I grew up with Robert E. Lee as a hero. I grew up near his home. I live very close to his boyhood home now. I went to Washington Lee High School. I went to West Point, the same as Robert E. Lee did. And there he was a figure of huge admiration. And then there were things around the Army. There's Fort Lee, a number of things. So he was sort of the penultimate example of great leadership. And I had a picture of really a painting, a fake painting my wife had given me 40 years before when I was a lieutenant that I kept in every set of quarters we ever lived in. And then in 2017, after Charlottesville, my wife asked me, do you still want to hang that picture? And I said, well, you gave it to me. It means a lot. And she goes, but what are people going to think when they see it in our home? And it took me about a month to wrestle with this. And I came to the conclusion she was right. And then on a Sunday morning, I took the painting down, took it out back and threw it in the garbage, and they took it away. And it wasn't because I suddenly decided that Robert E. Lee was an evil person. In fact, I think in many ways he was a victim of circumstances, where he was raised, the values he had, and the way he went. It was predictable that he would make the decisions he did. At the same time, he made a big mistake. In the spring of 1861, he decided to betray his country, his oath to the United States of America. He'd been in the U.S. Army for 32 years, and he fought a war both to destroy the United States and to defend slavery. And so that gets that tension where somebody who otherwise is a pretty good person who gets it completely wrong at the most important decision of their lives. So where I get on this is he's human. He's not perfect. He's like all of us. He makes decisions, and sometimes we're on the wrong side. Sometimes we do things that aren't right. And so I don't think we can automatically categorize all those people in one way or another. But at the same time, we can't pretend that we admire the mistakes they made.
So does that mean you would favor taking the names of the Confederate generals off of the bases?
Yeah, David, I would. A little bit of history for listeners. Those bases were established when the United States Army shifted from being a defense of the continental U.S. force, as it was for the first 130 years, to one ready to go to the Spanish-American War, First World War, and whatnot. So they went to form bases mostly in the South because the land was more plentiful and less expensive. And really, to curry favor with the local population, they named them after Southern figures. Some of them are not particularly successful as soldiers. And I think that it wasn't done with evil intent in the moment. But I think now it sends a message that says somebody, even if they were relatively good over the balance of a lifetime, if they are treasonous to the United States of America, we can't name a base after them. I just think that sends too much of a mixed message.
Symbolism counts, goodness knows. That's why we were drawn to symbols. At the same time, it's not all symbolism. There's also underlying fundamentals involved. And if you took away all the symbols of the racism that has been in this country, it would not fix the problem in and of itself. What thoughts do you have on what systemic changes we can and should make? The military, my impression is, has been ahead of much of society since President Truman desegregated the armed forces back after World War II. What did you see? What did you learn? What did you do in the military that might help us?
Well, the military gets a lot of credit, and we deserve some credit, but we didn't do near as well as sort of the mythology says. It took about 6 years after President Truman ordered that before most of the Army was actually integrated. And still, the representation of senior officers of African-American background is much smaller than their representation either in the Army or in the population at large. That is because systems build up habits. People go in, you have mentors that look like you have promotion boards that pick people look like you, And whether it is a conscious decision to be racist or to tilt the scales, we do that. And so I've become of the opinion that the idea that you just let it fix itself over time is too slow. I am a believer that we need to do forms of pretty vigorous affirmative action.
Well, what about that, General? Because the military, as I understand, has had affirmative action. There was an amicus brief filed back in the Bakke case supporting it. And Colin Powell, General Colin Powell, in his autobiography, said he wouldn't be where he was but for affirmative action. So I had the impression there was pretty vigorous affirmative action in the military.
There is affirmative action, but I would say it has been less vigorous than it needs to be. Even if you look in some of I grew up in special operating forces, and African Americans traditionally were hugely underrepresented there. Not because they didn't have the talent, but because from afar they looked at it and they said, that's not a friendly environment for me. And the same thing happens at more senior ranks. So I think we have done pretty well. I think our hearts in the military are generally right, but I think we need to do more because I think we need to represent the best of society as a symbol and sometimes an example other organizations can follow.
In closing, can you get there without quotas?
No, I don't think you could. I would love to say that you can. And quotas are painful because I've sat promotion boards where you look and then you have quotas for certain things, and someone who is technically more experienced or better qualified might be then disadvantaged and not promoted because of it. But in the long term, if you're going to fix a big problem, you're going to have to take big steps.
Boy, that's really profound. Thank you so much, General. Really appreciate you spending so much time with us today. That is General Stanley McChrystal. He is the founder of the McChrystal Group and a true leader in our country. Coming up, the deadline for PPP applications has just passed. Representative French Hill of Arkansas wants it extended, but it's not just that. He thinks there's some reforms that need to be done to really reach all the small businesses across Arkansas and elsewhere that need the help. There still is $134 billion to be distributed. How should we divvy up that cash? We're going to talk to Representative French Hill. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Coronavirus proved that every aspect of our lives, from business to health, is connected to Asia.
Healthcare firms testing the appetite for IPOs in Hong Kong too.
But you already knew that.
COVID-19 certainly had an impact on this.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern.
What does that mean for Asia if the dollar remains on the back foot for the foreseeable future?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
This July 4th, tune in to the Boston Pops right from your home. For greatest hits, finest moments, guest artists, and a special performance of a stirring salute to America's heroes. From first responders to essential workers, we honor those giving their all in this time of need. A Boston Pops salute to our heroes, presented by Bloomberg and Eaton Vance. Watch and listen from home Saturday night starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable, the lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda, the power of dreams.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
My name is Donya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
When the world stopped, people in our local communities didn't. At the Co-op, we want to say thank you to all the local heroes. Daksha wanted to help the NHS, so she and her husband Parish cooked 50 meals for a hospital in Harrow. But they didn't stop there. They've set up the Community Response Kitchen, delivering to hospitals, schools and homeless shelters across London. Now they're delivering between 1,000 and 3,000 meals every day. And they've achieved all this with no funding, just the support of local businesses and local people. To Daksha and Paresh and all the local heroes that keep our communities going, the Co-op says thank you.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Enter Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild. Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments. Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We begin with a headline out of Texas. The Texas Medical Center says Houston area intensive care units have reached 102% of capacity. Again, that word from the Texas Medical Center. Houston area ICUs now at 102% of capacity. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, they're all pushing higher. The Dow up barely higher by 2 points. Little change now, 25,816. S&P begins the first trading day of the second half with a 15-point gain, now at 3116, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ's up 74 points at 10,132. For NASDAQ, that is a gain of 0.7%, bringing its year-to-date gain to 12.94%. Stocks advanced as positive vaccine developments and better than expected manufacturing data offset concern over a jump in coronavirus cases. Tenured on 5 5/30 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. Gold down 0.6%, $17.70 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude back again close to $40 a barrel, up 1.4% now, $39.81. Brent, the global benchmark, at $42.05, up 1.9%. Recapping equities higher, S&P up 15, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. I'm David Weston. The Payroll Protection Program deadline for applications passed just yesterday, with some $134 billion yet to be dispersed. Republican Congressman from Arkansas, French Hill, has joined the CEO of Southern Bancorp, Darren Williams, to call for the program to be expanded and modified. We welcome now Representative Hill back to Bloomberg. So, Representative Hill, thanks so much. Good to have you with us. So the deadline passed yesterday. Is there any chance of getting extended?
David, there is. Just yesterday afternoon, late, the U.S. Senate extended the deadline to August 8th. I've encouraged House leadership this before we leave for the July, take action and concur with the Senate in that unanimous consent. Let's get the PPP still helping our small businesses.
Give us a sense of how much it has helped in Arkansas thus far. Is it keeping people employed? Are you keeping businesses alive that others would be gone?
There's no doubt, David. It was a lifesaver that on May time frame. That was essential for 40,000 businesses in the state of Arkansas for nearly $3.4 billion. And so we were keeping people and keeping them off the employed lines and getting those businesses ready to reopen, which Arkansas is now slowly doing.
And so what sort of modifications would you like to make beyond saying you have more time to apply? Give us some of the other terms that you would like to see loosened up a bit.
I'd like to see the ability for, and I need my colleagues' support, but I'd like to see, obviously, there's more weeks to use the money, which the House supports, that it's easier to get forgiveness for the loans, and that people could, again, their businesses still struggling. We have a lot of businesses, particularly in the hospitality area, hotel area, that just weren't able to take advantage of it earlier, and I think they could be benefited by this continuing the process for the next few months.
What about the money that didn't get expended? At least as of early yesterday, I saw $134 billion did not get dispersed. What could be done with that? What is within the Congress's power or somebody else's power to disperse it to?
Well, that's what Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, did yesterday by extending the application date to August 8th. That's the least we can do, David, is people's ability to apply for that $134 billion that remains in the program. But we can also potentially, in the areas of the C6 organizations, people who promote travel and tourism, for example, were not eligible for the PPP program originally.
In that piece that you wrote with your friend and colleague from Southern Bancorp, you suggested that they take $5 billion and give it to CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. Explain why that's so important, which Southern Bancorp is one of, as I understand it.
That's right. Minority depository institutions and CDFIs reach a whole different set of the population. A lot of minority businesses, a lot of small rural communities, pockets of urban communities, and it's just they're very effective at getting the money out, but they're frequently smaller organizations, so they can't apply for the funds as quickly as a great big national bank. So that's the reason for urging that portion to be set aside. We also think the disaster loan program can be improved. It's sort of a black box. You apply directly on a website at the SBA, and you may or may not find out if you even are approved for a economic disaster loan. Darren and I believe we can improve that dramatically by moving that aspect towards the banks as well.
Yeah, and you also have some questions about how this is being dispersed by whom at the Small Business Administration. It might not be in the best office. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's it's a disaster loan program. It was built for temporary programs for a few months right after a hurricane, and not something as complicated or as pervasive as this pandemic. I think if we move it from the Office of Disaster Assistance over to the 7A loan program and offer it through our community banks, customers will get answers faster. They'll have more transparency about the use of the money, and we'll be able to help more businesses in a more quick and open way.
Expand it out a little bit beyond on the PPP, if you would, Congressman, and that's the general. People are talking about perhaps a fiscal cliff coming up in July. Both as people run out of the $1,200 they got before, but also there's the July 31 deadline of the supplemental unemployment insurance. Where do you stand on that? What should be done? What needs to be done?
I think the $600 flat pandemic unemployment insurance on top of the state's already regular unemployment compensation payments was probably too high in some labor markets. A study a couple of weeks ago suggested that 60% of the people receiving that pandemic unemployment payment were getting more than they earned in their job. So I think the Congress should modify it, David, in order to make it more reflective of local labor markets. That's something that Secretary Mnuchin is committed to as he works with senators and House members to craft this bill. But I hope we can get that work done before the end of July when, as you say, that payment ceases.
You also have the state and local governments who are really crying, saying that they really need money. Any chance of getting some money to them?
The first thing we should do there is that money had even been spent that was sent to the states. Each of the small states got $1.25 billion, and then some of the big metro areas got their own allocation. I believe that the Congress should give more direction that money gets spent. Secretary agrees. In other words, the CARES Act perhaps was too narrow in its statutory language on how the states and local governments could spend that money.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Congressman. It's always a pleasure to have you on. That is Representative French Hill of Arkansas. Coming up here, providing health care at home. We talk with a paramedic from Empress EMS about how ambulance services can help alleviate stress on hospitals, such as we're hearing is happening right now in Houston. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mostly higher as investors are upbeat about a possible coronavirus vaccine. The Dow is falling 6 points, NASDAQ up 65, S&P 500 climbing 14. United Airlines is up 10% after announcing it's bringing back thousands of domestic flights in August. Pfizer is up nearly 5% after early trials of an experimental coronavirus vaccine showed it to be safe and effective. The surge in new coronavirus cases is causing more than 20 states to halt or reverse reopenings, and that threatens the jobs that made a comeback in June. ADP reports private payrolls grew by 2.3 million. 70% of those jobs were in leisure and hospitality, trade, and construction. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. How long will it take for the economy to
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30. with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose, unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
If you want to find out what the best laptop is for all those video conferences with your colleagues while sitting at your makeshift desk, you could ask a machine, or someone called Mac, or Priya, or Lewis, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience.
Hey, you're chatting to Ali here on Shop Live.
Isn't it nice to get advice from another human being? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Start the conversation now with Shop Live.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable. The lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda. The power of dreams.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Where do hockey and pop culture coexist?
So let me get this straight. You would be able to name more people nostalgically than currently? This doesn't
Come on.
You're crazy. I know.
Other podcast, Puck Soup, NHL analyst Greg Wyshynski, Sean McAdoo, and Ryan Lambert chase the conversational biscuit up and down the ice, skating between serious discussion on what's happening in pro hockey to irreverent opinions on movies, fast food, and life in general. Search Puck Soup on TuneIn to listen.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, from telemedicine to paramedic medicine. We talk with Hannon Cohen of Empress EMS about the evolving role of ambulance crews. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
I thank you very much, David Weston. We are 28 minutes away from the latest FOMC minutes. Complete coverage as those numbers break, as the details break right here on Bloomberg Radio. First trading day of the second half. Looking at an update here with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Dow have been swinging between gains and losses, up now by 13, a gain of less than 0.1%. S&P's up 17, up 0.6%. NASDAQ's up 82, that is a gain of 0.8%. Stocks are higher as positive vaccine developments and better than expected manufacturing data offset concern over a jump in coronavirus cases. Equities came off session highs after the Texas Medical Center said Houston's intensive care units exceeded full capacity. Also, Arizona is reporting a record one-day increase in virus cases. The 10-year, the yield there, 0.67%. Gold is down 0.5%, 17.71 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 1.3%, 39.76 a barrel on WTI. And with more on commodities trading, here's Bloomberg's Renee DeYoung.
Investors see signs that U.S. crude stockpiles dropped for the first time since May, yet the demand outlook remains remains uncertain as a resurgence of coronavirus cases force some American states to pause or reverse the opening up of their economies. Supply cuts from the OPEC Plus alliance and elsewhere helped drive crude oil prices up 92% last quarter. That was the most since the start of the first Gulf War in 1990. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
And one other commodities note, BHP Group plans to scale back operations at one of its mines in Chile as the coronavirus pandemic spreads in the biggest copper-producing nation. After earnings, FedEx shares, they're driving higher. FedEx right now up by 11.9%. Again, recapping, equities higher across the board with the S&P up 17. Now, first trading day of the second half, up now by 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues, the Wednesday edition. Here he is, your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Hospitals are coming under intense pressure again, but this time it's in Houston rather than New York as COVID cases rise and ICU beds fill up. One way to accommodate the need may be to recognize the extent to which paramedics administer health care in the home rather than in the hospital. Welcome now, Hannon Cohen. He is Empress EMS Director of Corporate Development. He's also himself a paramedic. So, Mr. Cohen, thank you so much for being with us. You have a fascinating piece here that taught me a lot about exactly what paramedics do today that may be different from what they did 20, 30 years ago.
Yes, thank you, David. I appreciate you having me on. Certainly, EMS, along with the rest of healthcare, has evolved over that period of time. As an EMS provider for many years, we've always had a small portion of our patients who we would treat at their home, and then they would opt not to be transported. It's been an evolving process across the country as this has become more and more of kind of the idea of patient-centered care. And in many cities and states, community paramedics have stood up programs where they actually respond specifically to treat people at the home and prevent them from being transported. In New York, during the peak of the COVID epidemic, it certainly became a vastly larger volume of patients who preferred to be treated in their home for various reasons, whether it was what they just deemed it most appropriate or they knew that the hospitals were in a surge capacity. So we wound up treating probably several 100% over almost 2,000 in 1 month, 1,400 plus a large number of other cardiac arrests. And all these patients were treated in their home under strict medical oversight, either with standing medical orders or through direct communication with a physician medical director, or in some cases via telehealth, always with the patient's best care in mind and with the desire to have them, cared for appropriately and in the right place at the right time. So it's been an evolving process for many years.
I'm sure one of the things that will occur to many people is that oversight that you just mentioned. Give us a sense of what the protocols are that you have. I mean, when is there discretion to act or not act, as opposed to when do people have to get in touch with the doctor or have them really weigh in on what needs to be done in the home?
Sure. Protocols for paramedic services across the country are regionally driven or state driven. They're very similar in nature. They follow evaluated, established best practices and treatment protocols that are in line with national standards of care that are done in hospitals and emergency departments as well. So they follow that very established pathway. Protocols are driven ahead of time to cover both, basic injuries to the most advanced care, including cardiac arrests, airway support, intubations, advanced monitoring, multiple medications, fluid administration, et cetera. And there are very hard stop guidelines as to what the paramedic can do under standing orders, which is still physician driven, or at the point in time where medical control and online physician has to be contacted for additional orders or to validate or even to, collaborate with on the care of the patient. In any instance, whenever a patient is treated and not transported, with the exception of, the viral pandemic protocol for COVID-19, a physician is always involved either on the phone or through telemedicine to confer on the case and then to have the patient sign off that they accept the care, in their home.
How does the reimbursement happen if they're not transported? Because I guess that the system was originally based on you have to move the patient to the hospital, we'll pay you for that. What if you don't move the patient to the hospital?
That's very true. Around I believe it's the 1960s is when the reimbursement structure started and was validated with a fee schedule many years later. And it is true, at least at the federal level, which most, insurance providers follow, it's a transportation benefit. So regardless of the fact that EMS has evolved to become a very high-level practicing mobile healthcare provider, especially over the last 10 to 12 years, the only form of reimbursement is if the patient is moved from the place of their illness or injury to a hospital or other appropriate medical facility. So regardless of what care is provided, reimbursement only occurs at the point in time that the patient is transported and dropped off at another healthcare facility, usually a hospital, especially in New York State.
So your service is obviously part of the healthcare system, and your first goal is to take care of people, to save their lives, to get them healthy again. At the same time, you do have a business. What does that do to the business model for you if you don't get paid, if you don't move the patient to the hospital? Does it actually create an incentive to take people to hospitals?
Well, that's the interesting thing. It certainly does. There actually is a kind of a negative incentive that, anybody and everybody should go to the hospital. But as healthcare practitioners, GMTs and paramedics are, we certainly understand that not everybody that dials 911 needs to be in a hospital. Quite frankly, not everybody that dials 911 really needs an ambulance, but we are the safety net for the entire country. We embrace that. We understand that. We respond to every one of their needs, and many times the most appropriate thing is not taking them, and we certainly, at that point in time, follow their wishes as long as it's medically and clinically appropriate. The lack of reimbursement for that certainly is a problem. In every other aspect of healthcare, if you provide treatment to a patient, you have the opportunity to be reimbursed for that. The opportunity, not necessarily that it happens. But in our end of healthcare, we have not evolved with the rest of the world, and that certainly is a strain. It's a strain on the EMS system across the country. It's going to be exacerbated by what's going on now as more and more folks are not transported because they're being appropriately cared for. So there are stresses of, very significant financial stresses that are being applied, because of this.
Well, what are the prospects for that evolution, as you call it? I mean, where are the possible roadblocks or resistance points to really evolving in the direction you're talking about? Are the hospitals with you? Are they happy to have you treat people that can be treated at home?
Well, I can't say, speak for the hospital, associations, but I do know the hospitals that we work with are very much centered towards caring for patients most appropriately. We do have some hospital-dedicated community paramedic programs specifically to enhance care at home, which the hospitals actually fund, because they do see that appropriate care adds value and is the wave of the future of healthcare. So there is significant support, across the country, across other practitioners, physician groups, hospital groups, et cetera, especially in my area. Some of the stumbling blocks are CMS's inability to decide, or they stated they don't have the legal authority. Certainly some other folks in the legal world and healthcare world believe they do. They worked on a program called ET3, which is actually involves this with future funding for it. So why that can't be, just rolled forwards, certainly confusing to me. But there are other states who have embraced it and do provide reimbursement funding for these treat-at-home programs.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of the healthcare system I didn't know about, that's for sure. Many thanks to Hannon Cohen of Empress EMS. Coming up, the USMCA finally went into effect today. We talk with Andy Puzder, former CEO of CKE Restaurants. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
The world's financial...
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street, especially the expats. And that feeling of pride. Lots of people are rejoining now. It's easy, and we'd love to have you back. Go on, feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoiners.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man,
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 13 minutes away from the latest Fed Minutes. We'll have those for you live as they break 2 o'clock Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. The Dow, now lower by 28 points, has been swinging between gains and losses, down now by 0.1%. The S&P is higher by 14 points, up by 0.5. NASDAQ up 77. That is a gain of about 0.8%. The Dow, by the way, now lower by 35 points. First trading day of the second half, we've got the 10-year yield at 0.67%. Gold down $12 the ounce, down 0.7%, 17.68. And crude now up 1%. West Texas Intermediate crude 39.66 a barrel. After earnings, FedEx shares soaring today, up by 11.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. And once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much to Charlie Pellet. After 3 long years, the USMCA, that's that successor agreement to NAFTA, went into effect today, modernizing an agreement that was negotiated in and for a different era. To take us through what this new agreement could mean for American business, we welcome now Andy Puzder, former CEO of CKE Restaurants, which includes Carl's Jr. and Hardee's, among others. Mr. Puzder was President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Labor. So, Mr. Puzder, great to have you back on. Good to hear your voice. Tell us why this was worth the wait, this new USMCA agreement.
Well, I think the two bullet points that kind of summarize it all is the International Trade Commission has estimated that it will add 176,000 jobs in the United States and could be higher, and that it will add $68.2 billion in GDP, or about 1/3 of a percentage point. So, obviously those are things we could use right now. But I think the biggest impacts, if you're looking at industry, are going to be in the automotive industry, where they've changed the country of origin requirements. Under NAFTA, only 62.5% of automobiles or trucks manufactured in Mexico had to be made with parts from Mexico, Canada, or the United States. That now goes up to 75%. So you've got at least 3/4 of the autos and trucks qualifying for tariffs are going to be made in North America. And you also have workers now employers required to pay workers a minimum of $16 an hour, which will reduce the wage gap between Mexican workers and workers in the United States, discouraging job movement. So the estimates are that in the automotive section, this will add about 76,000 new jobs, which is very significant because we've been losing jobs in that sector. And then with respect to agriculture, which I think is the other big beneficiary of this, we're going to get access to Canadian dairy markets, as well as opportunities to export American poultry and eggs. Canada's agreed to stop dumping. It dumps millions of dollars of subsidized dairy products that squeeze American producers out of third country markets. And finally, the USMCA, we took steps to fix Canada's discriminatory grain grading system that put American wheat growers at a competitive disadvantage. And this should end up benefiting American agriculture and food exports by about $2.2 billion. So very significant benefits for automobile manufacturing and farmers.
Significant benefits provided it's complied with. What about the enforcement provisions? Because I know that was a subject of much negotiation.
I think the biggest and most innovative part of the USMCA is this review and termination provision to ensure that we're never really again in a position where we're dealing with an outdated and unbalanced trade agreement. If we start to see, if China is importing or exporting more than the percentage limit, the 75% limit, for example, for automobiles to Mexico, we've got a provision where there'll be a hearing and we can withdraw from this agreement. So there are significant enforcement mechanisms in here that we haven't seen in prior agreements, which makes this also a template for future agreements with whether we're dealing with Japan or the European Union or China with our Phase 2 China agreement. We've now got a template, and I think a very effective template.
Well, just so, I was going to ask, to what extent can this agreement inform other trade agreements? The way some people say some parts of the TPP, which President Trump walked away from, actually were replicated in the USMCA.
I think some of them were replicated. I mean, I don't think anybody ever said that everything TPP was a bad idea. But I think they took out what the team with Lighthouser and Navarro and Cohen and Kudlow thought were good things and put them in the USMCA. And I think other countries now know what exactly it is that the United States is willing to agree to, and can see pretty clearly where this needs to go. And look, we've now got this really powerful and huge economic system in North America. I mean, Mexico, Canada, and the United States now have created this really economic behemoth. And I think other countries will want to get involved and want to become a part of this. So I think we're in good shape. This passed in the Senate with more votes than any trade agreement had ever gotten before. And I think we've also said to the rest of the world that we can do this on a bipartisan basis, which isn't something we're telling the rest of the world on very many things. So it's a good thing we're telling them on the trade agreement.
So, Andy, we have a powerful economic system here, but it's sputtering a bit now in the wake of the pandemic and the shutdown and the attempt to open back up and not open back up. Give us your take on where the economy is right now, where business is in the United States.
Well, if you look at May's numbers, and I don't think and I'm glad you asked me this because I really don't think it's getting the coverage it needs. There's the obvious numbers, which everybody heard. There are 2.5 million jobs created and 2.1 million fewer people unemployed, which really blew the expectations from the economists out of the water. Unemployment went down to 13.2% from 14.7%. Now, there may have been there's a little noise in those numbers. It may have actually been to 16%, but the economists' estimates were that it would go near 20%. So that was better. We saw a 17.4% improvement in retail sales, and economists were projecting would be 8%. We saw a 16.6% increase in new home sales, and many economists were estimating that would be a negative number, and I think the highest consensus was it would go up 1.9%. And then we had the Association of Realtors coming out and showing that new contracts signed for homes, and so this is not only new homes but all homes, went up by about 44% from April through May. Now for June, we had the ADP employment numbers out this morning, and I think it showed well over 2 million jobs created, maybe even 3 million. I can't remember because I generally try and wait for the Department of Labor, the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers to come out tomorrow. But we did have some good news from the Institute for Manufacturers come out showing that, in fact, manufacturing increased very significantly last month. I think it's 52.6% of manufacturers said they were growing. That was a huge increase, and the estimate by economists was in the 40% range. So we're seeing very, very significant improvements in the economy. Now, are we where we need to be? Are we where we were pre-pandemic? No, we're not. But you have to keep in mind that we shut down the entire economy. We can't expect that we're going to be back where we were while the pandemic is still with us, and it is still with us. Nonetheless, these are very significant numbers. We're recovering, and we're recovering much faster than anybody thought we would, and Jay Powell admitted that yesterday.
Right. But Andy, it looks like May was a good month, no question about it, but are we continuing to improve at the same rate given the need for some partial shutdown now in places like Texas, like Florida, like Arizona?
Well, so far, what you're seeing in June, I told you the manufacturing numbers. I should also
it's manufacturing.
Consumer confidence went way up as well in June. Yeah. Those numbers came out yesterday from the conference board. And as you know, consumer confidence is important because consumer spending is about 2/3 of our GDP. So far, we don't know it's July 1st, right? So we don't really know the numbers from June. There could be some impact from people having to pull back on these openings. I hope it won't be too significant. Right. But so far, what we're seeing in June, the numbers so far look pretty good. We'll have to see. I'm anxious to see the jobs numbers tomorrow.
Fingers crossed. We all are, by the way, Andy. Thank you so much. That's Andy Puzder, former CEO of CKE. Always good to have him on. That does it for Balance of Power for today. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
My name is Danya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
Mike's mother of all marinades.
I love my homemade barbecue marinades. The only problem is no one else does. So today I'm trying something new. Caramelized crispy pork belly tumbled in sea salt, red chili, black pepper and sugar, and sweet sticky chicken fillets in tangy mango, coconut and lime. This is amazing.
Yeah, because you didn't make it.
Introducing the new Fire Pit range, exclusively at Tesco. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco. Available in the majority of larger stores while stocks last.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, Hilton Knowles on the unrest that followed a police killing in his Brooklyn neighborhood more than 50 years ago.
Standing by my mother's living room window, I tried tentatively to ask her why our world was burning. She gave me a forbidding look. Boy, be quiet so you can survive, her eyes seemed to say.
Hilton Knowles on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
On the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Wednesday, July 1st, 2020, first day of the third quarter. Here we are. And we're going to be focusing on the most recent Fed minutes crossing the Bloomberg terminals at any minute. And, we'll see what the Fed was thinking about when they were hosting that last meeting and what the conversations were about, Jason.
And we're getting a few heads courtesy of Dow Jones, the Fed debating options to provide more economic support. That's not a huge surprise. We know that this is top of mind in many ways for the Fed. We heard it from Jay Powell yesterday, Carol, when he was out testifying on Capitol Hill. The Fed has been front and center on this. You heard legislators thank Jay Powell for everything that he's done. And certainly we've heard investors essentially on our air thank him.
Yeah, I feel like Fed, once again, the only game in town, it seems. All right, we're going to talk about those Fed minutes, take a look at market reaction. Let's get a check on those markets right now. Let's see what Charlie Pellet.
All right, and here's what's going on. First trading day of the second half, Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. The Dow swinging between gains and losses. 9-point jump right now in the Dow. S&P's up 19, a gain there of 0.6%. NASDAQ is up 91 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain of about 0.9%. 10 years down 6/30 seconds, the yield 0.67%. We've got gold down $10 the ounce now, lower by 0.6%, $17.70. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil pushing higher, up 1.4% right now, $39.85 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Got to mention Dun & Bradstreet Holdings, one of Wall Street's oldest data and analytics providers. First day of trading there, up 13%. Bloomberg LP, parent of Bloomberg Radio, competes with Dun & Bradstreet in providing financial information. Recapping, S&P up 20, a gain of 0.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. This portion brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network, delivering the support you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Carol?
All right, let's learn more about those Fed minutes, as we know, crossing the Bloomberg terminal and just coming out. Let's get into it, and let's set the Bloomberg Business Week agenda with Andrew Husby, U.S. economist at Bloomberg Economics, on the phone from New Jersey. Dave Wilson with us, stocks editor at Bloomberg News, on the remote access line from New Jersey. So, Andrew, let's start with you. What sticks out for you?
Still picking through some of the headlines here, but it certainly seems as though really the Fed remains in a deliberative phase on certain changes to both the policy guidance and also on something like yield curve control. Now, these sorts of programs have been sort of talked about in markets, and the Fed is actively debating them as well. But certainly right now, the focus for the Fed is on enhancing and making sure the programs that they've currently got up to speed are running. And meanwhile, something like pinning Treasury yields out further along the curve or tying specific economic thresholds to future moves in policy. Those are things that they're looking at, but no decisions quite yet based on my first read of the minutes.
So, Dave Wilson, talk to us about the equity investors' relationship to the Fed at this point, because it's a pretty important one, and we continually hear that from the big money managers that we talk to, and I assume you hear the same.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all about, what are they doing to support the economy? What does it all mean for interest rates? And one thing that's interesting, if you look at today's stock trading, is that real estate and utilities, maybe the two areas most sensitive to rate changes, are two of the best performers among the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500. The real estate index for the S&P 500 hits high for the day after the minutes came out, and the utilities index is trying to get above its high. It's darn close at this point. So, clearly what they've had to say in terms of policy, where things stand, at the very least, kinds of reaffirm the confidence that people are having that rates are going to stay